Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and I'm not at home right now because I'm in Australia, where I found the brand new Ninjago sets a few days early before their official release. Alright, here we are with the entirety of the Ninjago Summer 2026 wave. There are 10 sets in total, 6 of them go to Dragons Rising Season 4 Part 2, 3 of them correspond to Ninjago Legends, and 1 of them corresponds to Ninjago Legacy, and is our final 15th anniversary set for the year. Now, this is a very strange wave. In fact, it is probably one of the strangest Ninjago waves we may have ever gotten, and there's a couple of logistical reasons why, and I want to get into those before we jump into my mainline thoughts and reviews of the sets and the wave as a whole. Now, we were introduced to the concept of this wave last September at Fan Media Days in Denmark when LEGO designers said that Ninjago Legends, Ninjago Legacy, and Dragons Rising were all going to be running concurrently at the same exact time. And this was a statement that was incredibly exciting to me, but also rather perturbing, and I was quite worried about what that was going to look like. For instance, the last time that we got Ninjago Legacy as a major push for the 10th anniversary in 2021, a lot of the mainline TV show sets suffered. Ninjago Seabound had a very limited range of villain designs and very few sets, basically no main villain builds. The island only had like 3 sets to its name, and I was kind of worried that the same was going to happen here. And I actually directly asked a question during that time, and I said, how has the budget been split up? Are we treating Legends and Legacy as their own themes? Are they all under the Ninjago budget umbrella? Is it being stretched across the entire thing? And basically the designers answered and said, honestly, the budget is being stretched across all these 3 sub-themes. However, they would not have decided to do this without allocating the right amount of resources, which essentially was their way of saying that we were able to give the entire Ninjago theme extra budget for this year to support the 15th anniversary. So if you count up everything we get in total, this is bigger and has more effort put into it than a normal Ninjago summer wave. And that is very true. If you look at all 10 sets here, and you count all the new molds, the new minifigures, and all the new pieces, across Legends, Legacy, and Dragons Rising, that is very true. This is probably one of the greatest Ninjago waves ever, if you treat it all as one. But unfortunately, because so many of the different sets are under different banners, it does tend to make a lot of these sets feel a little bit more lackluster than they probably would have been if they had come out during a regular Ninjago year. Maybe if we didn't have the Legacy set, and we focused on just Legends and Dragons Rising, we would have been able to use some of that budget, and more importantly, some of the age range marks for some of these sets that probably deserved it a little bit more. Or maybe if they had a little bit less of a focus on Ninjago Duskfall, the Legends short for this year, we would have been able to have some of that budget go into Dragons Rising. And at the end of the day, with this wave, I unfortunately feel that it is the case of LEGO Ninjago trying to do too much with not enough resources put into the budget to actually make everything as good as it could be. And that's not to say that these sets are bad or that I don't like them. In fact, some of these sets in this wave are some of my all-time favorites, like the Twin Titan Mechs, I think is an amazing set. That's probably one of my favorite Ninjago sets of all time, and I built it literally a few hours ago, and it's already one of my favorites. And say what you will about the X1 Ninja Charger, I already said a lot in my individual review of it costing $90, which is ridiculously expensive, but setting the price aside and the minifigures being a bit lackluster, I think the build for that is really solid. It's probably one of the coolest car builds and vehicle builds we've ever gotten for Ninjago. So it's clear that a lot of talent has gone into making these sets, but I think from a vision standpoint and the leadership behind the team, I definitely do feel that they're trying to bite off a bit more than they can chew. And I think the major thing that you can see as an example here is the Dragons Rising wave, where this year in particular, because of the anniversary and now because of Legends, Dragons Rising feels somewhat left behind. And a big part of that is because a lot of the higher age range marks have been allocated to the other sub-themes. If you don't know how it works, every single year, every LEGO theme has a variety of different age ranges that they basically can allocate their product portfolio to. which makes total sense. You're going to want to have some sets for younger kids, some sets for older kids, and a bit of a mix in between. You're not going to want your entire Ninjago wave to be all for older kids, or your entire Ninjago wave to be all for younger kids. You want to have a diverse spread. But unfortunately, because of the advent of these sub-themes, a lot of the higher age range of marks, which normally would have gone towards a big Dragon's Rising playset, or something that represents a really exciting moment from the show, or maybe even something that would be going back in Ninjago's history and having more legend sets, the age marks have been distributed very strangely this year. Now, as a marketing decision, LEGO decided to make every single Ninjago legend set not the main adult-oriented focus. Instead, the highest age range marks this year are going to Ninjago Legacy, which on paper, from a marketing standpoint, makes a lot of sense. Marketing wants people to go into the store and say, oh, look at these Ninjago Legacy sets, they're for older kids and older teens, this must be for the people who grew up with Ninjago, and so it makes sense that they are awarded the higher age range bracket. But unfortunately, because of that, despite the fact that marketing can decide the age range marks distribution, there are actual build restrictions that go into designing a LEGO set per age range mark. And so, for example, a set like Battle for the Dragon Blade, which is a beautiful set, but also a very frustrating set to me, because this is a set for Ninjago Legends, which debuted last year as the high age range mark for Ninjago. It was meant to be geared towards older fans, especially with the advent of the black and white Ninjago monstrosity shorts, which were incredible, but obviously geared towards an older audience. And that was what Ninjago Legends was supposed to be. But because all of the high age range marks have been taken away by Legacy, albeit to make some amazing sets earlier this year, one of the Ninjago Legend sets is stuck with the 9+ age range, which unfortunately means that while the base of the model is really nicely done and clearly feels like something designed for a bit of an older audience, the models standing on top of it are almost cartoonishly simple. In fact, they are just ever so slightly modified to be a little more complex than your standard 5+ Ninjago Mech or Ninjago Dragon. And it feels like there is a very stark juxtaposition here between the black box and the dramatic lighting of what Ninjago Legends is supposed to be, and then these very simplistic and childish models just standing on top of your display base here, which is not what Legends is supposed to be. It was introduced as something for older Ninjago fans, but literally because of a contrivance in marketing, we are stuck with having to dumb down some of these sets that were initially made for an older audience. And this is a lot of logistics that go behind how LEGO makes their decisions and how they plan out themes. And if I were in charge of LEGO, I honestly don't think I would do it any differently. It makes sense to have your age range marks be limited. It makes sense for there to only be a few 16+ or 14+ sets and only a few 12+ sets, and have some offerings for younger kids, 9+ and 7+ and 6+ and younger. The distribution makes sense, but trying to cram in 3 different sub-themes into 1 year felt like a little bit too much to me. Now, I do think that, honestly, probably the biggest way to solve this would have been to take away one of the Ninjago Legends sets. I would probably take away this one and have that 9+ age range be used towards Dragon's Rising instead, and give us another set that can appear in Dragon's Rising. If you don't want to do Ninjago Legacy as 9+, you want to keep all of those sets to be 14+, the highest age range, then just don't even attempt doing an older teen-oriented Ninjago set with 9+ on the box, making the builds dumbed down. I would have not had so many legend sets. I would have taken one away, maybe even taken 2 away, and dedicated those age range marks to Dragon's Rising, which now, if you look at the Dragon's Rising composition of the entire year, I'm not just talking about the summer wave, I'm talking about the entire year as a whole, it feels like a very pared down, back to basics, simplistic Ninjago wave, and not necessarily in a good way. Especially the January sets were honestly not very exciting, and I talked about this a lot in my January Ninjago reviews. I felt like it was the Ninjago wave that played it the safest out of almost any Ninjago wave we've gotten so far. It really felt like they were just taking the bare bones concepts of Ninjago, not taking any risks whatsoever, and doing what they could to just make the sets be good, but also be for a younger audience. But the problem is, at this point in the TV show, the actual maturity level and the plot lines and what's going on in Dragon's Rising right now do not match up with the sets that are made for it. And in some ways, this is almost kind of a good thing, because There are so few Dragons Rising sets this year that the writers were basically allowed to do whatever they wanted with the characters. Season 4 Part 1 has multiple episodes dedicated to Lloyd going on a spiritual vision quest that doesn't feature any products, that features minifigures that are not even physical minifigures, and I don't think he would have been allowed to do that if he had to shoehorn in another Cole mech. So, in some ways, it's a blessing in disguise for the show that these sets are kind of lackluster and not that exciting, and there's very few sets for Dragons Rising. But on the other hand, as a fan of both the Ninjago show and the sets, it does make me feel that Dragons Rising Season 4 has had the absolute weakest wave of Dragons Rising sets that we have ever gotten. If you compare the summer wave of just Dragons Rising to Season 2 Part 2, which was one of the best Ninjago waves ever, or even last year, Season 3 Part 2, where we got so many incredible builds for Dragons Rising, like the Temple Bounty and the transforming jet for Lloyd. Two of the best Ninjago sets. I mean, the Temple Bounty is alright, but the transforming jet, all time, one of the best Ninjago sets ever, they were only able to accomplish that level of detail and that level of playability because Dragons Rising was able to actually have some of the higher age range marks be allocated to it. But since literally all of the high age range marks are allocated to either Legacy or Legends, Dragons Rising is kept in the 6+, 7+, and at most 9+ age range. And when the largest set for Dragons Rising is the $130 land bounty that is capped at a 9+ age range, it does start to feel that the Dragons Rising wave has kind of been left in the dust compared to everything else that has come out. Now, I've said all of that to say that this is, again, one of the strangest waves for Ninjago ever, and I don't expect this to happen regularly. I think that this is a result of the 15th anniversary for sure. This is definitely a marketing decision, and as a fan of Ninjago, I love seeing 3 different Ninjago sub-themes on store shelves at the same time. The brand power is stronger than ever with so many sub-brands underneath it. It's really cool to see Ninjago branching out and having 3 sets devoted to an alternate universe featuring different ninja, Sensei Ivo and the ninja Nate, Mira, and Jin. That is really cool that Ninjago is dedicating that many sets towards what presumably is some sort of alternate universe or one of the previous cycles of the Ninjago universe. That's a crazy concept to deal with and actually put out major products for, but unfortunately because of that, the mainline sets of the main story of Ninjago, which is Dragons Rising right now, are suffering as a result. So I think I've said enough about the composition of the wave. I have a lot more thoughts on the minifigure distribution, the choices of minifigures in the entire wave as a whole, but I think it's now time to jump in and do a brief overview of all of the sets. I'll actually be publishing individual reviews of all of these, so stay tuned for those, and unlike my previous mega reviews, I will not be just taking the individual reviews and playing them one after the other. I actually have a lot I want to say about this wave, and I feel like this is one of the most consequential waves of Ninjago in a long time, and so the mega review is going to be something different. I'm going to talk about each set in general terms at a very high level. I'm not going to go in-depth into every single detail and feature in this video, but if you want to go in-depth into any particular set, over the next day or so, depending on how many I'm able to film tonight, I will be publishing many reviews individually of every single one of the Ninjago sets and also the other sets you see behind me, so you can choose to go in detail on any of the sets that you really want to see up close and personal on those videos. But now let's jump in to the wave as a whole. I'm going to go from smallest to largest. Our first set here in the Mega Review is 71862 Lloyd's Dragon Mech Battle Pack. It retails for $10 US or 10 euros and comes with 81 pieces. And essentially, it is a carbon copy of Kai's Dragon Mech Battle Pack, which released earlier this year, 71851, which had 85 pieces for the same price. However, this one does include the Lloyd color scheme and a couple of brand new pieces, although unfortunately, none of the minifigures are new, and the minifigure selection is the major thing that I feel really brings this set down and makes it, honestly, probably one of the worst sets of the wave. Now, the entire concept behind these Ninjago battle packs is it's a cheap way for you to be able to army build the bad guys. That's kind of how it's always been since the start of Dragons Rising. The first one we got for Dragons Rising Season 2, which was the best one, which had 2 bad guy minifigures and 2 good guys, and that was super great. And over the years, they have kind of shrunken these down. They've taken away one of the 2 bad guy minifigures. Now we're down to 3 minifigures. But again, for a $10 mech, it is still the best value $10 mech you can get in LEGO's entire portfolio, especially compared to themes like superheroes, which often give you 1 or 2 minifigures per mech, and LEGO Star Wars mechs, which are $5 more expensive, but with 1 less minifigure, because that's LEGO Star Wars for you. However, I will say that the choice of minifigure here is honestly really disappointing. The main villain that you are meant to army build in this battle pack is the Loyalist, and while it does kind of make sense because the Loyalists are army builders, you can see a ton of them in the show, they're probably the least interesting army builder that we've gotten in a while. Clearly, a lot of budget was taken away from these characters. They share the same torso and legs as their leader, which has never happened ever before in Ninjago history, that the main villain is so budget constrained, it's wearing the same exact clothes as all of the henchmen, so it kind of just makes them feel a little bit less unique and more generic. And the big thing that is very unfortunate to me is that, again, we're speaking in terms of the Mega Review, we only get 1 copy of the Lava Monster in this entire wave, and that only comes in the $130 set. And I feel like it would have been way more consumer friendly if LEGO were to have included at least 1 more copy of the Fire Monster in this set, because at least you would be able to get it a little bit cheaper, and it would have given this set something a bit more unique. I'll dive into more thoughts on the set on my individual review, but the other minifigure you get is Jay. Jay does not come with his full dragon form, he just comes with the armor and the half mask, but he does come with a brand new piece, and these are the Dragon Claws, and this is actually probably one of the most exciting new pieces of the entire wave, where they've actually decided to give us the physical claw elements that we see the ninja turn into when they transform into their dragon forms in the TV show from Season 4 Part 1. They actually molded the golden claws, and that's something that appears in some of the sets of this wave. They bafflingly did not do it for every single one of the ninja. We only get it for some of them, and in this case, you don't even get him in his full dragon form, which really makes it feel to me that the claws were probably supposed to come out in January, but because of the way that the LEGO budget works and is distributed, they held it off until the summer wave, and that's why it only comes in some of the sets, and frustratingly, the ninja in their dragon forms, officially, many of them do not actually have the claws. But it's good to get them in this set, and it's good to get them in a $10 set, which means that if you do just want to get multiple claws, if they don't appear on Pick-a-Brick, this is a pretty cheap way to be able to fully outfit your ninja. The final minifigure is Lloyd in his dragon form without armor or wings. It is just the minifigure with the helmet, but that actually makes sense because the entire mech is not really a mech. It's actually supposed to be a large brick-built version of Lloyd in his dragon form. You can see on the back, you have the new for 2026 tail/flame piece they introduced for Ninjago that's really supposed to emphasize the Lloyd unlocking his elemental power of life, revealed for the first time this year in 2026, so they have the plant-themed accessories around him, and they have molded the small dragon wing introduced for LEGO Elves in this new dual color green and lime, which I think actually looks really, really cool. The other brand new piece for this set is a very interesting one. They have taken the mech cockpit, first introduced for LEGO Nexo Knights in their second wave back in 2016, and they have removed these stud connections on the front. Instead, they have made it fully smooth to, in this case, make it feel a little bit more organic, like the scales of a dragon, but for other mechs, you can clearly see it as robotic armor, so you can kind of use it in different ways. I don't think this is going to replace the existing mech cockpit, which is useful because that one does have the 4 studs on the center that you can stick tiles to and stick different designs to, but I think this is a nice alternative to make it feel a bit more organic. This is an upgrade over the Kai Dragon mech, which had the tile sticking in the center of it, which I feel is something that definitely made it feel a bit more robotic and less what it was supposed to be, which is, of course, the large-scale dragon form kind of upscaled up. It's not a bad set, and for $10, I actually think the value is pretty good here. Really, the only thing that drags it down significantly for me is the choice of villain, especially because the Summer Wave introduces 2 brand new villains for Ninjago. We have not gotten these physically before, the ice and the fire monsters that actually appear in massive hordes in enemy form for the show. It's very weird to get one of the main villains or one of the antagonist villains from the first half of the year and honestly not even one of the really cool ones, one of the more lame ones that's just a standard minifigure. So maybe that was a budget thing, but unfortunately, I do feel like that drags down this set quite a lot because the villain faction included is the most uninteresting one they could have picked. But now let's move on to the second smallest set. Our next set here is our first fully villain-focused set in a while, and that is 71863 Zilvar and Grimtack, the Dragon Beast. It retails for $20 and comes with 232 pieces, and it is a really good one. In contrast to the last set we looked at, which I thought was one of the worst, I actually think this is one of the best. It's not a perfect set, but I really love it for what it is. Minifigure-wise, I'm going to go into this in a lot more depth when I go into the individual review, but we'll take a very quick look right now. We have our new villain, Zilvar, who is a member of the same tiger tribe that Lord Raz belongs to. As of the time of this recording, we literally know nothing about him, so we're going to have to wait and see. All I know is that the LEGO designers have called him a very cool character. That is all we know about the character at this point. I cannot wait to see how he plays into the story because, of course, the Tiger Tribe is supposedly fully extinct and wiped out by the merge, so how could he be around? Next up, we have a fully outfitted Dragon Kai, and this is really good because it is the same Dragon Kai minifigure that we got earlier in the year for the 2026 Wave 1 sets, but they have actually upgraded him with the golden dragon claws he is meant to have as appear in the TV show. I think they should have had these from the beginning, but I feel like this is a similar situation to what happened, funnily enough, on the last Ninjago anniversary, where they had to do some funny shenanigans with the budgets of pieces, and a certain minifigure piece, specifically Nia's hair with headband, which was designed and meant to appear in the Island sets in March, was pushed to the June wave because they decided to use the budget of the Summer wave to support the creation of that new mold, and I suspect that's exactly what happened here. These were designed and were meant to be included in the January sets, and instead they were pushed to the summer to make the summer wave feel a bit more special, but also to allow them to use the budget in other places. It is always kind of funny how LEGO does things like this behind the scenes that the average consumer will just not really understand why things are the way they are, but this is the most blatant example I can see of something that was clearly meant to be part of the minifigures from the beginning. The only unfortunate thing about this, as I earlier mentioned in this video, is that none of the other ninja really get these. We only get 2 out of these 6 main ninja who get their full dragon forms with claws this wave, and specifically Zane, Cole, and Nia never actually receive the official dragon form versions with claws, meaning that you are going to have to purchase multiple copies of these pieces on the aftermarket just to be able to make your minifigures look the way they literally were designed to look. However, I am glad we get this one fully outfitted in a $20 set. That is a very nice way to get it at a low price. Nia is also included in the set, and unfortunately she is not in her full dragon form. She just has the Draconis armor, and she doesn't have the claws or the wings or even the mask. She just has the half mask with the hairband. So it is the same Nia minifigure that we saw in the Elemental Monster Spinners earlier this year, but again, I guess it kind of makes sense. They didn't want to include 2 different dragon minifigs in one set, so if they had to include another one, Nia makes the most sense. Now, speaking of the model in general, I actually want to spend some time to talk about the design of this creature, which is easily one of my favorite and most unique designs that we've gotten for a Ninjago villain build before. This is meant to be a half dragon, half gorilla beast, and we've never gotten that from Ninjago, and I really like just the intricacies of how it's built that make it feel completely different and unique. First and foremost, it is utilizing the Ninjago Rising Dragon headpiece as the main head of the build, which is a pretty interesting feat in and of itself to accomplish this on a $20 budget meant for kids of a younger age range. Keep in mind that I talk a lot about age ranges in this video. This is a 7+ set, and 7+ sets have certain design standards that designers have to adhere to, which I will be talking about for some other aspects of the model, but specifically, it needs to be simple enough that a 7-year-old kid could put this together. And the major thing is that it was actually really hard, and the designer Li Chi-Wing has a full post on Instagram about this where he explained it was very difficult to have the eyes be colored in and still make this fit the age range that they were trying to go for. And the original model that he was actually building this off of, it was built by another LEGO designer, it just had it with no pupils, and they were just gonna call it good and say, you know what, we're just gonna decide to have there be no pupils. It's way too hard to figure out how to color in the eyes for a younger age range. And Lee said, not on my watch. I'm going to figure out a way to do it that younger kids will actually appreciate. And the way he does it is super clever, actually. I'm going to try to somewhat deconstruct this, and you can see the build in there is deceptively simple. It is using a variety of plates to offset the studs by a half stud to allow the eyeballs of the model to perfectly line up with the pre-molded head made for the gimmick, allowing the eyes to be fully colored in pink. Now that is a very, very impressive detail, and honestly, I think that is the thing about the model that impressed me the most, is that that was able to be factored in for a set that was designed to be built by kids aged 7 and up, which has its whole other set of design restrictions. Of course, you can open and close the jaw. There are no prints here. You can just have the stickers on the jaw there, but I think that works out very well. I like how it looks very bony in its design. It kind of looks skeletal, but also very menacing. And of course, those big tusks look really, really cool as well, especially as you move the head back and forth. Only downside, again, is that you can't really leave the head up. It always is kind of pointing downwards due to gravity, but I don't really think that was a major priority because it's just fun to play around with it, and it feels really alive when you move the head back and forth like this, and it's so expressive. I don't even really care that it can't support the weight of the head, because leaving it in the upright position I think actually looks worse than having it be pointed down a little bit based on the curvature of the build. So this actually works out very well. Altogether, the proportions are really cool. It's using the SCCBS joints, so the fixed joints here, which totally makes sense for a set made for younger kids, but you can see it's got these gigantic meaty paws on this side. There's even some spikes coming out of the large fists here, which look really cool. Almost like a Monkey Kid inspired design with the graphic here, so I think that's quite nice. And you even have a club for the tail, which is very cool, but reminiscent of LEGO Nexo in the way that's built. And the only major con I have about the model is honestly not the fault of the designer. This is a guideline that LEGO has asked designers to enforce when they are making sets for younger kids. We've seen this for the Imperium Hunter Hound. We saw this for Ninjago Core with the Water Dragon and the Earth Dragon. But if you are designing a four-legged creature and it is meant for a younger audience, LEGO designers literally have to fix the back legs in the click hinges. I'm not sure if this is a hard rule, but I've never seen them break this rule, so I can only imagine it is a hard rule, because otherwise there is no reason as to why they would do this. If they used mixel joints instead, you would have so much more posability. You would have the ability to move the back legs back and forth. You could splay them, you could rotate them, you could achieve so many different poses. But unfortunately, because of this apparent rule in LEGO design, they have fixed the back legs. And the reason for that is that, let's say a kid's playing with this, the front legs are kind of splayed out everywhere, but if they just wanted to stand up, let's say I'm playing rough, I'm a kid, I slam this down on the ground, even if the front legs kind of buckle, the back legs are always going to be standing, so it always kind of looks like it's in some sort of an action or standing pose. And as a really young kid, I won't be frustrated by not being able to let this model stand up. Now, do I think that that is a little overkill? Yes, but also you can see how the mixel joints don't actually have a lot of clutch power. It's really easy to splay these out, so I can actually see if a kid were to like press down on the model, as I'm lightly pressing down now, it's really easy to splay it out, and I think it'd be really frustrating if a kid were to place this down and it just kind of goes absolutely flat on the ground and these legs splayed out, and that doesn't look cool. At least with just the front legs splayed out, this kind of looks like it's sniffing or searching through the ground. It looks a little bit better, and as a kid, they will not be as frustrated than if the limbs just fully splayed out. Now, if you are watching this channel, you are probably some sort of LEGO aficionado. You might have played with LEGO as a kid, maybe you're getting into it now, but somebody who's watching a LEGO YouTube video is not going to understand to the same level in which a kid who may have never played with LEGO before might get frustrated with a toy that has the limbs splay out. So I understand why that is a rule for LEGO designers. As a reviewer though, and as an adult playing with a children's toy like this, it is frustrating to not be able to move the legs back and forth, but I understand it from a design principle for children. Do I think it's a little overkill? Yes, I don't think they need to do that every time. I think mixel joints probably would have been fine, but I get why LEGO does it. With that though, that is really my only complaint about the model. $20 is otherwise a very good price for a brand new villain character with a new color for the head, a new print for the head, new prints for the torso and legs. There's actually a new piece there for the waist-mounted katana holder, which we'll get into a lot more when I go into my in-depth review of this. And of course, 2 other great minifigures in the set. Very hard to complain about this one. $20 is very nice, and I like this a lot. So let's now move on to the next most expensive set, or the next smallest set. Here is the 3rd smallest set in the wave, and this is the $40 set 71864 Kai and Cole's Combiner Vehicles. It comes with 394 pieces, and as I mentioned, it retails for $40 in the US and 30 euros, which feels a little bit more fair than 40. The set comes with, of course, Kai and Cole to pilot their Combiner vehicles, and, for the first time, an ice monster. I will do a very close in-depth analysis of all of the minifigures of this wave in a future video coming out very, very soon, as well as, of course, in the individual review, so I'll spend a couple of seconds just looking at this one. A very fun new dual mold for the Ice Dragon sculpt, mid-legs, which is super cool to see. Not something we see every day, and transparent blue arms, plus a really cool ice hammer weapon as well, which funnily enough never really appears in the show. It's a great minifigure, love the design, I think it's super cool. It does feel a little bit unfortunate that it is the exact same mold as the fire monster, and they just kind of obviously ran out of budget there, so they could just scrounge together what they could, but I do appreciate it for what it is, and I do like the minifigure overall. It's very striking with the white and transparent blue. Kai and Cole are using their exact same Draconis armor without the wings or the helmets that we've seen earlier this year, so I will not spend any more time on them, and instead focus in on the vehicles. Now, at first glance, this is a very standard Ninjago set. You have 2 vehicles right here, Kai's car and Cole's motorcycle. 2 things we have seen many copies of before. For whatever reason, Cole always gets the motorcycles. I think his first one was season 5, if I'm remembering correctly, and then he got one for season 11, and now he has another one. And I'm sure I'm forgetting like 50 million other Cole motorcycles that we've gotten before. Kai, of course, has so many red cars, I'm not even going to bother to count them here, but it is just another one. And it's actually Kai's 4th oversized red vehicle this year, so take that as you will. Now, however, the most interesting thing that you can do with the models is that, of course, the main idea is that you can combine them. It's in the name of the set. So let's see what that looks like right now. Similar to some LEGO Monkey Kid sets in the past, and even some recent LEGO City sets, these have a specific way that you can separate out the vehicles, essentially split them in half, and they are really only meant to interface with each other. So you can take the back half of Cole's vehicle and click it on to Kai's vehicle here, and all of a sudden this becomes, in my opinion, way more interesting because this is now a 3-wheeled vehicle with 1 in the back and 2 in the front, which I think is very cool. And then you can turn Cole's vehicle from a motorcycle into some sort of a trike, which I think this looks a little silly with the 2 wheels in the back and the 1 in the front. It looks a little bit childish to me and just kind of juniorized in the way that it's done. I think the other vehicle looks a lot better in this configuration, but it's something cool that you can do with it. So this is actually a really fun gimmick, and I almost wish that they had a line of sets that could do this, and maybe this is just the first in a line of sets that can do this, but I think it's a really cool idea to be able to allow vehicles to use parts that can swap back and forth. And the good thing is that they integrated enough color scheme, black, into the color scheme of Kai's vehicle here, where it doesn't look all that out of place, where you can see a little hint of red here, but that works quite nicely with the orange, and then you can see a lot of red at the front here, and a very tiny bit of orange on the back here, but mostly this just looks gold and black, which makes the color scheme work. They have tried to do this for some other characters in the past, namely Nexo Knights has pulled stuff like this before, and I feel like it's never really worked quite this well, because obviously, here you actually have a lot of thought and intention put into the color schemes to make it function as nicely as this is. So I'm actually a big fan of how they pulled this one off. I think that the transformation feature is very cool, and there's an extra added bonus here. You may notice the sticker on the back of the flag of the Kai part. Well, you can actually remove the flag, stick it on the back of the Cole part of the vehicle, and it's actually a double-sided flag. They don't really advertise this on the instructions, but clearly that's what it's supposed to do. You can turn it upside down, and now you have Cole's symbol right side up on the top, Kai's on the back, and it just works like that. So now if you want to switch it back and have the flag be on the back of Cole's motorcycle, you can go ahead and do that. And I think that's actually pretty clever. I think if they included just 2 different flags, the kids would not have bothered to swap them between the vehicles. But now I am actually bothering to swap them between the vehicles because that's actually something that is a fun way to kind of make it feel like, oh, maybe this one's in command, or I want to move this over to the other side, and the other one is the main vehicle, and this one's following its lead, so I think it's actually a cool idea. Kai's car has a turret here where you can kind of move it up and down. Nothing too crazy there. I almost wish it came with at least one other minifigure so they could man the turret, but it's not that big of a deal. For a set focused on both Cole and Kai, typically, I would say that it just makes sense to have both of them and one villain. However, this is $40, and does this feel like $40 worth of Lego? No. Not in the slightest. I think generously, this is $10. I don't even think I would say 15. I think I would say this is worth 10, and I would say maybe this is worth 15. I can see a world where they would charge 20 for this, but it still doesn't feel as substantial as the $20 Zilvar and Grimtax set. Like, imagine if the car was a set by itself, and then this was a set by itself. This $20 set still feels more substantial than this, so maybe they're kind of around the same size. So let's say a best case scenario, this is 20, and best case scenario, this is 10. That only adds up to $30. Even if you say this is 15, that's 35, and $40 US just feels way too high for what you get here, especially because it only includes 3 minifigures, 2 of which are not new, which is rare for Ninjago. Ninjago usually has new minifigures, even new ninja suits, and am I advocating for new ninja suits every single year for the ninja to get 2 or 3 new suits every year? No, I actually think that is too many, and I actually am happy that for the summer wave here, for the first time in years, they've decided not to give them new suits and instead have given them the same suits that they wore on the first half of the year, because that is actually allowing them to use the minifigure budget in other ways. So I actually do appreciate that. But again, for a $40 Ninjago set, I feel like my standards are so high now because Ninjago is consistently very good, very well priced, and gives us a lot for our money, that this is just not really cutting it for me. I like the build enough. It's probably the least interesting set here. I just don't really have that much else I have to say about it. I will have more things to say in the individual review, so stay tuned for that. But with that, let's now move on to the next set, which is actually the same price. Our next set here in the Mega Review is a very goofy and funny one, and that's because this is the 4+ set 71865 Zane's Ice Dragon Battle. It is a 4+ set that retails for $40 and comes with only 141 pieces, which on paper sounds awful, but again, going by 4+ Lego standards, that is actually pretty in line with what we would expect for a 4+ set. Oddly enough, this is one set to actually include exclusive minifigures, and that is in the form of our 2 acid snakes here, who have legs instead of the snake tails. They were given legs so they can stand upon the gigantic acid snake that comes in this set, which makes me very happy we are getting giant versions of all of the monsters, even though this one probably will not appear in the show. I am happy that we are getting physical forms of all of them, even though one of them is a 4+ set and the other one was only given away at probably the most limited LEGO event ever, Fan Media Days last year, and I was lucky enough to attend it and get my copy there. But I am glad that they do exist and people can put them together should they please. And then you have Zane's Ice Dragon, which almost certainly will never appear in the show and is just something they invented for 4+, which they often do. So I think this entire set will not actually feature in Dragon's Rising, but again, it gives us some nice things to play with. For the hero side of the minifigures, you get Zane here. Sorry, I had the wrong Zane there for a second. This one just comes with the dragon form helmet. No armor, no wings, because LEGO deemed that to be a little bit too clunky and hard for kids to play with, so they did not include it in this set, which is a bit unfortunate. And it also includes Sora, and because they do not want to include half masks in these sets, she's literally just having her hair, no armor, and the face, which feels kind of awkward to me as an official Ninjago minifigure. Like, now I have to put this official variant on my minifigure wall because it's just the 4+ version of Sora without any accessories. But it is what it is. I definitely think that it would have been nicer to include maybe something a little bit different. I don't know what they would have done for Sora because they really don't want to put the half masks in 4+ sets. They're worried kids are going to choke on it or it's hard to put on. So they just left her without anything, and that is how the minifigure goes. Thankfully, though, they did actually include 2 copies of the Golden Dragon Claws, the exclusive accessories I mentioned earlier in this video, where you can actually choose to use them to outfit Zane with the claws, which is certainly something I am going to be doing. I'm very happy they chose to do that, and even though he doesn't have the armor and the wings in the set, technically it is a variant of Zane that you can choose to use the claws with, so at the very least, we're getting them for technically 4 out of the 6 ninja in this wave. Now, speaking very briefly about the build, and I will talk about this a lot more in the individual video, but since this is the Mega Review and this is the 4+ set, I'm going to spend the least time on this one. You can flap the dragon wings up and down. Frustratingly, they do not hold their weight, so they will kind of just bend down on their own, especially if you try to leave them up. They will just kind of flop down naturally by themselves, which is always a little disappointing for a Ninjago dragon. I would have much preferred if these were maybe on ratchet joints so I could permanently have the wings up like this or down, but maybe for kids they felt like this way was better so kids can pretend they're flying it through the air like that. So I understand why they did that, but that's just a minor complaint here. It does, however, feature a brand new print for the dragon head that is dual molded in white and transparent blue, and that does look nice. I would love to see somebody make a better looking dragon out of this. The jaw is done very awkwardly because the mouth is just attached right on it, so I don't know, even for a 4+ dragon, this just doesn't really feel right to me. It feels super awkward in the way the jaw is done. It almost feels like a baby dragon or a teen dragon, but maybe that's what they were trying to get across. You do have the claw elements still factored into the wings, which is a little surprising. And then you have the gigantic dragon legs, which they actually introduced in the 4+ J's mech, and they introduced this new mold this year to allow you to have these big dragon legs in 4+ sets, and that's what this one comes with. There's a couple of new pieces, like the dragon body, I believe, is either new or it's a new color for 4+. It's just one gigantic piece, and then you have the big tail on the back. Otherwise, though, nothing much I have to say about that. Much funnier, though, is the acid snake, and this is kind of what makes the set for me. I really find this quite endearing, and the best part about it is how floppy it is. The entire thing is designed to kind of just flop around, and I love that. I think that's very funny. I think that this is a very funny choice to do for a 4+ set. The head is on a frictionless joint, so it is literally meant to sway back and forth. A lot of the instruction images show the mouth just like either fully closed or looking up, or my favorite pose, really wide open. Sometimes they have that in the official images, and I think all configurations are quite funny here. You can actually move the head back and forth because the head is on a mixel joint, and because it's the acid snake, does the head look like a snake to you? I don't know. I don't really think that this head looks a lot like a snake to me. I feel like it looks a lot more like a dragon because obviously these pieces were made for dragons, but I can kind of see what they were trying to go for here, and if they didn't want to make a new mold for a 4+ set, I think it's the best they could do. And then the best part is, which I didn't even notice when looking at official images, only after I built it I noticed this, but the tail just flops around because it is using the hinge joint for mixel joints that has no friction, so the tail literally just swings around wildly, and I think that's a lot of fun. And I think that's very funny, and I think kids would have a lot of fun just flopping around the tail, flopping around the head, having all sorts of mayhem and madness with this little snake for the acid snakes. And the best part is, you can use the acid snakes and you can have them sit down, and so this snake can ride the bigger snake and this one can ride on the tail. And now I kind of wish they included even more acid snakes. For $40, include one more so you could put a third one on there, and I think that would be very funny. And I think that altogether, it's a charming set. For 4+, I don't have that much else to say about it. I think it's cute. Do I think it's worth $40? No, but I don't think any 4+ set is worth the money they charge for it, so this is just kind of more the same, and now let's move on to more interesting models. Next up, we have a pretty significant jump up in price. We go from $40 from the 4+ set all the way up to $90 for the X1 Ninja Charger. I've already put out my full review of this, so I won't spend too much time in the Mega Review because I actually really feel like almost all the points I talked about in my full review are very relevant to the context of this model, but I'm going to summarize them as briefly as I can. This is our final Legacy set. All of the Legacy sets received the 14+ age range mark for this year. For the most part, almost every single one did. This one was no exception, and unfortunately, I feel like that took away from a 14+ age range mark that should have gone to one of the larger Legends sets. It is very competently built, it's a lot of fun, but it also is very redundant, and it doesn't really need to exist. This is our third remake of the X1 Ninja Charger, which is not a very interesting vehicle. It was a vehicle that appears in literally one episode and a brief cameo in a second episode that they were literally just reusing the animation model for. It is not something that is very significant to Ninjago history, and they clearly made this because LEGO designers and LEGO probably corporate said that, hey, kids like to buy red cars, let's sell another one. So that's why this set exists, and I understand why it does from a marketing and sales standpoint, but as a Ninjago fan, very excited about the final Legacy set to celebrate the history of Ninjago. This does feel like a bit of a letdown when it could have been anything else. I would have preferred Cole's Tread Assault being remade in Legacy form, come up with some way to do that play feature that actually works for modern play techniques, or do Zane's Ninja Copter, the final rebooted set that didn't get a vehicle. Instead, we get our third X1 Ninja Charger remake 5 years after they already remade it for the 10th anniversary. That being said, the entire play feature of the set is very fun. Lift up the hood, and the motorcycle will shoot out with great force, which I'm not going to demonstrate right now because it's going to absolutely careen off the table, but I'm going to try to do it just one more time and have it be blocked by my hand here. Boom, you can see how much power that shoots out. It doesn't ever get caught. It's very easy to load back into position, and it just pops back down, and there is no evidence of any sort of Technic mechanism or anything on the top of the model, which is very impressive. It's fully smooth, and again, while I do feel like the age range for 14+ would have been better served for other sets, I cannot deny that they were able to use that to its greatest extent here to make a model that not only looks very cool on display, but also has a killer play function that works better than any previous iterations of the same play feature that we've seen in the past. Now, the way it works when I flip this over is that you can see that there is a spring on the back, which basically allows you to launch this piece of Technic outwards very fast and deploy the motorcycle. And with great force, it will shoot across the table. It works so well, and I'm very, very pleased with how that function works. Also on the underside, you may notice some other very cool details about this, such as something not apparent from the sides of the model, but they actually put a lot of effort into the shaping of the car. These pieces are angled a little bit backwards, so you actually have the ability to have them really form a nice curvature for like the air intakes on the side of the car here. You have the usage of a lot of these really nice angled elements to form the bodywork of the car, and while the windscreen is a little bit out of place because the original X1 did not have any sort of windscreen, it was an open-air convertible, I actually think it works way better for this set. I've seen a lot of people comment that if they changed the color scheme to green and gave us a new Mr. E with a helmet and called this the Ninja Nightcrawler and just said, you know what, the Ninja Nightcrawler has a motorcycle launching feature now, or just called this the X2 and did not make it a Legacy set and made it a Dragon's Rising set, I think there are many options they could have done to have made the community be a lot less harsh on this model than they are right now, but it's a combination of a lot of factors. The fact that it's our last Legacy set, the fact that it's our third remake of a model that nobody was asking to be remade, except, I guess, children who buy red cars, which I guess LEGO is catering to that, which makes sense. They are a company after all. This is probably going to sell pretty well for them. Although will it though, because at $90, this has 691 pieces, and that price feels egregiously expensive to me. Every year and almost every summer wave, for whatever reason, LEGO releases in the Ninjago theme a $90 or $100 vehicle-based set that feels ridiculously overpriced, and they started doing that like 2 or 3 years ago, and they've literally done that every year since, and it's very funny because it's always some random vehicle that people don't really care about, and it's always $90. And it's very overpriced, and this is the $90 overpriced Ninjago vehicle, which this is becoming a genre in and of itself. I don't fully understand what the pricing strategy is behind that. I guess LEGO is trying to see, can we experiment with this? This is something that ubiquitously typically sells very well. How far can we push it? I suspect that sets like these are honestly an experiment for LEGO to see just how far they can push the price on something that traditionally will sell well no matter what. And so that's why we are getting this big red car for $90, and when it really should be like $60. I feel like I'm holding maybe generously $65 worth of LEGO here, especially with 3 minifigures only, one of which is a reuse from earlier in the year. So I just simply find it very hard to recommend this set because of value alone. Now, talking about the minifigures, we have Kai here, nothing too special here. He's just in his ZX Legacy outfit without armor to fit in the car. You have a new General Cryptor. I don't know why this minifigure exists. I can think of a million other Ninjago minifigures that probably deserved a new head and torso print over another General Cryptor who doesn't even resemble the original counterpart because they didn't bring back the old armor piece. Not expecting them to, but I feel like that was a big part of General Cryptor's character and visual design, and if you cannot bring back the gigantic asymmetrical armor that he had, which was very cool back in the day in 2014, I honestly don't even think you should remake Cryptor at all. I feel like it almost would have been better to just call this Nindroid and call it good. And then finally, you actually have a really good minifigure here, and that is Dusk, the old Elemental Master of Shadow from the Serpentine Wars with a brand new torso, leg print, and head print as well. They made specifically for the character. I'll talk a lot more about this one in my video about the minifigures, so let's move on. Here is our next $90 set of the wave, and that is 71868 Wildfire's Transforming Dragon Mech. It comes with 821 pieces as well as a host of new minifigures, including, finally, a brand new Wildfire, the new Ice Monster, and a new Empress Beatrix, as well as a play feature that is honestly a ton of fun, a little bit more simple than I would have expected and honestly was hoping for, but still a lot of fun to play with, and even an opposing villain build in the form of Empress Beatrix's mech. Altogether, this is a set that I feel really earns the $90 price tag, and it is astounding to me to take this set and put it next to the X1 Ninja Charger, which has 3 minifigures and like 300 less pieces, and realize that they are on shelves at the same time and the same price is being charged for them. It's just really crazy, and I think it just shows how overpriced the X1 is. But turning our focus onto this set, there's a lot to love about this one. I will spend a lot of time talking about all the minifigures in detail for the individual review as well as my minifigure showcase, so I'm just going to go over them very briefly right now. Wildfire not only gets a new torso, but she gets a new face as well, which is a long time coming. Finally, she gets a face print that really matches the depth of character and expressions we get in the show, so I am so pleased about that. The only downside is that I feel like the time is perfect to finally give Wildfire a ninja mask. The hair is designed to fit around a half mask. All they needed to do was to include one, and for whatever reason they still haven't given her one. Maybe they're waiting for the final season of Dragon's Rising, but it feels very long overdue. She also has a brand new piece in the form of the waist scabbard here, which is very, very cool. And I love the usage of these short swords making their return from Season 2, Part 2. We already looked at the ice creature, so the only other new minifigure to look at is Empress Beatrix, and we will transition from that to the mech itself. Empress Beatrix, after visiting the Land of Monsters, was mutated, and in the show, she was actually fused with her mech, so she can no longer leave her mech. She is now one with her vehicle, and that is very, very cool. It's a very cool idea. Part of her mech is also transformed into organic material thanks to her time in the Land of Monsters, so her arm was ripped off. She now has a monster tentacle for one arm. She has extra tentacles growing out of her back, and it's a really, really cool transformation for our very first Dragon's Rising villain, who was very tech-focused and was just kind of a regular minifigure. Now to be this like monstrosity of a mech is, I think, a very clever idea for them to transform their villains and have them come back in new and unique ways. Now, Beatrix here is wielding the Weapon of Desolation, which is finally show accurate. It is ridiculously oversized. Even for the mech, it still feels very oversized, and especially in the hands of a minifigure, it just is not going to work of that scale, but it is cool to get it finally in the right design compared to how it appears in the show. And then, of course, you've got the points of articulation here, like you've got the tentacle arm on one side, you have the robot legs, kind of like Darth Maul, where she is kind of turned into half robot, half person, which is super cool. And then, of course, you have all sorts of asymmetrical detail on the mech to exemplify this. So the tentacle arm has spikes on the side of the arm. The main mech arm still has one spike on the side here. You have some jets on the back. You have the tentacles on the back instead of the crown that she originally had. And then, of course, you have the SCCBS legs and the movable feet. Now, the only unfortunate thing here is that the original Empress Beatrix mech, which came out in 2023, which is what this is supposed to be a mutation of, was honestly probably one of my favorite smaller scale Ninjago mechs of all time. It had knee articulation, it had full detail all around it. It was like a little bigger than this. It wasn't that much bigger, but it was a little bigger than this. And unfortunately, it seems like this has been pretty severely downgraded and downscaled from that. And I honestly feel like this is actually something that evolved over the course of prototyping this set. One of the strangest things about it is that when this build appears in the show, we've already seen it in the TV show, Beatrix is wearing a different armor piece, and she's wearing a much larger spiky armor, and that actually does not fit. It physically will not fit in this mech, which is why they changed it for the minifigure. But I actually suspect that this was actually originally built around the larger frame of the original mech she had. That's why she was able to wear that larger armor piece, but unfortunately, over the course of prototyping and model development, we often see things get shrunken down and downscaled, and I really do think that this is an example of something where the mech got so significantly downscaled to the point where it is very spindly, it's just not as imposing as the original model, and while I think the aesthetics of it are very cool, I definitely do wish that it was a little closer in size and scope to the original model, which in and of itself was a side build for a larger set, but this just feels downscaled a little too much as opposed to how menacing and gigantic this actually is in the show. Still though, I like the concept, I like the aesthetics, I just wish they went with that original scale. Now moving on though, I do want to focus in on the dragon mech itself, and this is actually a really exciting one because this is our first time since 2023 that the new ninja characters have gotten their time to shine. We have Aaron, we have Sora, we have Wildfire, and sadly they have left out Frack. I guess technically Euphrasia is also part of the team now, so they're missing two of them, but especially Frack because he has been around, he has been a main member of the ninja team since like the end of Season 2 Part 2. We are now in Season 4 Part 2, and Frack just being not in this wave at all is super strange, especially because he has like an entire character arc in Season 4. He's one of the main characters, we meet his dad, we learn a lot more about him, and yet the minifigure is nowhere to be found. Alas, I really wish they included just one more in this character lineup, but moving on to the actual build of the dragon, the way this works, I'm going to go ahead and remove the swords from Wildfire. You can place her inside the cockpit like so, and you can have this act as a standard mech. And there's actually holders for the swords on the back as well, so thankfully they have actually bothered to give us that, which is very nice. You can place these swords on the back there, and it's probably also why they are short swords, because the longer ones would have hit the mechanism on the back. You can see it has a dragon tail with a golden version of that new leaf piece, and yes, it does have knees, and it even has Bionicle Titan piston articulation, something they have recently brought back for Ninjago Mechs. I'm honestly surprised it took them this long to realize they could literally use a piece they made for Bionicle back in 2006 to finally give mechs the articulation they deserve, but I guess better late than never. Because of that, you can get this into a variety of crazy poses, and I'm very happy that they actually chose to have the legs feel a little bit more monstrous and more like a creature. You have the digitigrade style of legs here where it kind of bends backwards, and it just feels a lot more unique compared to standard Ninjago mechs. Even the dragon head is pretty obscured. Like from the front, you wouldn't even really see the dragon head. You can kind of see it from the side. When you look at the model from the side, you can obviously see that, okay, something is folding up there for a transformation, but it's actually pretty tucked away, which is nice. Now, I think it's time to show off that transformation itself. You can articulate the arms back and forth, you can rotate the elbows, which I really appreciate, so that's really nice. They actually did not skimp out on articulation whatsoever, which is honestly a little surprising because I've seen them do it for other mechs this size. But the first thing to do is you remove the sword, and the sword actually becomes the tail of the dragon. It just becomes a lot longer, and of course you can just leave it on there as well. And then the transformation is probably the most simple transformation I've ever seen for any set like this. You literally just take the head, fold the head backwards, you take the torso, and everything is mounted on ratchet joints, and the entire torso just folds back like so. You can fold the wings out like this. They don't really change at all. You just kind of have the wings folded like so. And then you just move the dragon head up. And that is literally it. That is the extent of the transformation. And I will say, compared to the insane transformation with the multiple joints and the folding away pieces and the craziness that we saw last year for Lloyd's transforming jet mech, when I first saw the name of this set, I got very excited and I imagined it was going to be a much more dramatic transformation than literally just using the exact back legs of the mech and turning it into the dragon's back legs. I guess it works. I mean, this clearly is now in a dragon form. I guess I was just hoping for something a little bit more interesting from Ninjago as a transformation feature here, especially because of the previous transforming set that we got. And I guess you can fold the horns up a little bit as well. Now, that being said, I actually think that this is a ton of fun to play with, and I guess there was no need to overcomplicate it if it didn't need to be overcomplicated. I don't know how I would have solved this, but really the only downside here is that the back legs still feel super robotic, and I guess that's the point. It's not supposed to be an organic dragon, it is supposed to be a mech, but the way that these legs are angled just feel very much like traditional mech legs. Even though they are supposed to look a little bit more monstrous in the way that they're curved, I definitely feel like in the configuration that they're in with this dragon, there's not that much you can do. They're really, really pushed all the way back. There is no way to make it kind of stand up like this, because then the mech is just going to be standing up by itself, and it just feels a bit awkward to me to look at it from the side, right? If you just have this like placed on the side like so, I do think that is a little bit awkward, so it is what it is. Now, of course, you can move the claws back and forth, and the arms don't change whatsoever either. They literally just stay the same for this model, so I think that totally works out for the build. Wildfire is still in the cockpit, but now it looks like she is riding the dragon, so that totally works. And then the wings themselves, I'm really glad that they fully committed to the Wildfire color scheme. This isn't like Kai's transforming dragon mech, that they have Wildfire pilot in the show like they often have her do. This is truly meant to be a Wildfire set. They have committed to the color scheme of sand green. You have the dark red, the bright red, and the gold, and I think that is really, really cool how they fully committed to making a set focused on one of the new Ninja and a large $90 set to boot. That makes me very, very happy, and I really hope that if any of the sets here do well, I hope it's this one. If there's no set that sells well other than one, I hope this is the one, because I want to show LEGO that people actually care about these new characters. They don't need to just rely on the old legacy ninja characters and keep on having them go through the same arcs and not really have that much character progression, when you can actually devote your focus on new characters that people are actually going to fully support and like. So hopefully the set does well. Product sales mean everything to LEGO. They don't really care about how good the TV show does. They don't really care about what the online community has to say to some extent. Obviously, of course they do, but the number one thing to show LEGO that you want to see more of something you like is set sales, and that's why, despite the fact that I feel like this set could have been better, and it's a little awkward in dragon form, and a little awkward in mech form, and I think that the transformation could have been a bit more dramatic or interesting. I'm definitely happy to fully put my support behind this set because of what it represents as a large-scale model for these new Ninja that so often do not get the spotlight, even though Dragon's Rising is supposed to be about the beginning of their training arc. So that's all I have to say about this one. Real happy about the build. I think that the concept is very good. The build maybe could have been a bit better, but overall a really solid set. And now let's move on to our final Dragon's Rising set before we get into Ninjago Legend. I was going in order of the cheapest to most expensive, but I actually want to cover all of the Legend sets altogether. So we're going to skip the $100 set, and we're going to go straight to 71869, the Land Bounty, which retails for $130 US. It comes with 1,214 pieces, which on paper actually sounds pretty fair, but unfortunately this has a direct comparison to the original Land Bounty, which came out in 2019 and honestly is one of my all-time favorite Ninjago sets. I know it's a pretty controversial take to say that. I know a lot of people don't like it. I really like the old Land Bounty. And when I heard they were remaking it and doing a new version, I was very excited. And while I do like a lot of what this set has to offer, and in many ways it improves upon the original model, I still do feel that if you look at straight up value here and you look at the size of the model you get, which is a lot smaller than the original Land Bounty, no fabric sails, even the minifigures included are not quite as exciting, diverse, and even the quantities of minifigures are not quite the same. It does feel like a little bit of a downscale compared to the original. Not even a downgrade, I would say downscale, because it is not as large as you would think. In fact, looking at this model, on paper, this looks like it would be a very, very large Ninjago build, but when I have it in my hands, it certainly does not feel like it's anywhere close to being worth $130, and I am left wondering where the 1,214 pieces actually went. And well, the answer is that a lot of them actually went into the transformation features, and there's a lot more details hidden away underneath this, which make a lot of sense. But again, if you compare it to the original Land Bounty, it had a full interior section because they did not have all the transformation features, so you actually had an arcade cabinet and beds for the ninja and little stations for them to pilot the set inside the build. And then you had a completely separate detachable flyer with its own interior that could deploy out from the back. And then it had two large fabric sails in really high quality. It had razor blades that would eject and kind of spin out from the sides. And it had a ridiculous amount of minifigures. In fact, I'm looking at the minifigure count right now. It had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 minifigures, many of which were exclusive, 3 of which were exclusive to the set. And that set also retailed for $130 back in 2019. Now, the funny thing is it actually had less pieces. That one had 1,178 pieces. This one has 1,200, so this one technically has a few more pieces, but they are a lot smaller and it feels just so much downscaled compared to the original. Now, speaking of the minifigures, there is only one exclusive minifigure here, and it is one minifigure I honestly feel should not be exclusive to this set, and it's almost a bit of a detractor that this is exclusive to the most expensive Dragons Rising set of the wave, and that is the Fire Monster. Now, of course, as the time of recording this video, this set isn't even out yet, so they may choose to include this minifigure in a magazine down the line. I would not put it past LEGO to do that. I think it's very nice if they were to do that, but as of right now, your only way to obtain the Fire Monster, which appears on screen in multiple quantities, is by purchasing the Land Bounty for $130, and that does not seem very right to me. It has yet another acid snake, and honestly, I would have maybe been happy with like a second lava monster or fire monster just to have multiples of them. I get why they didn't want to include multiples, but for the composition of the wave, I think it would have even made more sense to include any of the other monsters. Literally pick any of the other ones because we get so many acid snakes. I do love the minifigure, but now it feels a bit redundant. For the ninja minifigures, you just get Jay, Nia, and Zane, and Lloyd in his dragon form, so 2 villains and 4 ninja. Unfortunately, Jay, Nia, and Zane do not have any armor, and that is because the armor would have actually constricted their mobility inside the vehicles and not allowed them to fully pilot them, so they have no armor, just the half masks. One thing I do appreciate, though, is that they have tried to sort of give the ninja their signature weapons. Jay has nunchucks, which appear for the first time in a very long time. Typically, they just give him a standard katana these days. Zane has his shuriken or the ninja throwing stars, which I really appreciate because those are his signature weapon. And again, he often just gets stuck with a regular katana. Unfortunately, Nia does just have a regular katana, but technically the minifigure is exclusive to the set. She is certainly an exclusive variant, and that's because she is using the brand new waist scabbard piece I mentioned earlier in this video to hold katanas 3-stored style like Zoro there. So that is very cool to get that attached onto Nia, but unfortunately it comes at the expense of any armor or really anything else that could be added onto this model. Now Lloyd thankfully is actually fully outfitted in his full-on dragon form or Draconis form, as I asked Doc Wyatt what these are officially called, and he said he likes Draconis forms, so I'm gonna call them that now because I like that name too. He does actually have the golden claws, which he appears with in the TV show, which is really nice. Those are very, very good to get. I'm really happy to get him fully outfitted in this set. I only wish they had these in January, but I've talked enough about the claws on this video, so now let's move on to the actual build of the set, setting aside all of the minifigures. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that there actually is steering on this model, and that is achieved through a wheel at the back here. You can turn a gear to allow you to steer the back of the model back and forth. And this is a little different compared to the original Land Bounty, which honestly had a much cooler steering mechanism in my opinion. The OG Land Bounty from 2019 had both front wheels steer, but the really cool functionality they had for those two front wheels is that the front one steered at a greater angle than the back ones here, so you could kind of see the way that it would steer much like a real world vehicle, and that was super cool. But obviously, for reasons you're about to see, they could not integrate the steering into the front wheels, and they had to do it in the back. I'm glad this does at least have steering. I think it could have been very realistic for them not to include steering on this model, so I'm glad they actually did make the effort to do that. There's a few major aesthetic changes that I do appreciate. I like the usage of the red Seabound blade here on the front, which actually first appeared in the 2023 Lloyd mech, and we haven't really seen it in red since, so it's really good to get that again, because I do think that color works quite well for the build. And then you have these big jet engines on the back with transparent blue detail on the sides of them. The windscreen is using the exact same style of windscreen as the original Land Bounty with the upside down windscreen, but it's a different piece here. It's actually one they introduced this year for LEGO City, and then it has a center connector piece down there, which obviously is meant to represent some structural detail, but here it's just purely aesthetic because it's not connected to anything in particular. Now, to access the cockpit, you can lift the entire hatch up here. The whole hatch will open up. We'll take a quick look at that in a second. And then of course you can turn the wheel in the back to pilot it. Now, the major transformation feature of this set, and something that it does do a lot better than the OG Land Bounty, is that this is actually a 3-in-1 model. So the first thing you do is you pull back, the wings will unfurl, the jetpacks will fold up, which is very cool, and then you can lift the entire structure off and you can allow the boat part to fly off, and this is super cool. I think this looks the best out of all of the different vehicles that detach. It looks super cool from this angle with the upside down windscreens. I think that the engines look really cool. This is a very, very cool flyer vehicle, and I do like the semblance of a flag on the back. If they didn't have the budget for fabric, I am glad they actually did have this. And if you want to see what that looks like for the transformation, fold in, fold out, and it's really cool because the wings fold out while the engines fold up. So they kind of just get out of the way of the engines. It's a really clever system. It's honestly really simple. It's not even that complex as a build, but I really appreciate it for what it is. So this is very cool. The Technic panels I also do appreciate. However, that is not all. That is not the only thing that you can do with the model, because now you're left with these two things here, and you just kind of look at it and you might see a wheelbase, but the way this actually works is very interesting. All you need to do is pull these apart. You have your own vehicles here, and then this is actually a piece that can turn into a motorcycle, and that is also super simple. You just go click, and that's it. That is a motorcycle right here. It is a very similar mechanism as the Legends of Chima Wolf Combat Lair bike had. I don't know why that's the set that came to mind right when I just did that transformation. I'm sure other LEGO sets have done that. That's just the one I'm thinking of. Unfortunately, it does mean, oh, and I've thought of another Chima set because this also has the same function as the Aquila bike, the Eagle bike from Chima. But the reason why I bring both of those up is that unfortunately it has the downside of being very asymmetrical. So you have one side that has all this Technic nonsense on this side with blades and everything. They've kind of tried to disguise it a little bit with the blades. And then you have the other side that is just fully exposed wheels. I actually think this side looks a lot better. It feels way cleaner to be oriented like this. But unfortunately, just due to the nature of how the function works, there is no way to avoid the massive Technic on one side. So you have like a gun on this side, and then you have many Technic beams on the other side. So I think this looks a little awkward. I could not see this being sold as its own thing. I could see this part being its own vehicle in universe, maybe its own LEGO set. This, not so much. This is obviously a leftover transformation bit. And then you are left with this car, and there's literally nothing you do with the car to transform it. You just kind of leave it as is. It's a bit of a buggy, so you can take it off-road. Now the front wheels become the back wheels and vice versa. Steering mechanism is now at the front, and you can just easily load minifigures in by lifting up the cockpit. It only fits one minifigure, and that's it. And then it has these lights on the top, which I actually really like because these lights accomplish a few different things. They allow you to know how to line up the models, so when you're placing this back into place, They actually line up and connect in right there, so that's pretty perfect, but aesthetically speaking, it kind of makes sense that a car like this would have lights like that, and I do appreciate how they have some semblance of a front bumper and headlights. I guess these are supposed to be the exhausts of the original build, but now they act as headlights with a front bumper, so I actually think that's pretty cool, and this is a ton of fun to play with. It's actually ridiculously fun to split it apart and put it back together, and I did it many, many times. Even if the vehicles, especially the wheeled ones, are not the most exciting by themselves, I had great fun in just changing around the configurations over and over again, and I definitely feel like that is a major play benefit that this set has over the original, in that the original could not do this with the wheels. You could just separate out the flyer, and even then the flyer was like kind of an afterthought. It really was just meant to be one large vehicle, but here this is very clearly built around that 3-in-1 concept, which I really appreciate. Unfortunately, it does not have really any interior space because of that. The only interior space that we have whatsoever is a cockpit, which seats 2, so that's nice, but there's literally nothing going on inside the cockpit other than seats, a middle console, and then you have the control panel up at the front there, so just definitely not as roomy as the other Land Bounty was, and that's something that I feel is sorely missing from any model that calls itself a bounty. Has to kind of act like a home for the Ninja, because that's what bounties are, and I feel like we have lost that home aspect that the original set really got right. The OG set had tassels on the side and lanterns, and a full interior space and windows, and a living space, and video games to play on the inside. And this has none of that. This is more of like a combat vehicle, and I guess that's what it's supposed to be in universe, but it definitely feels like it doesn't fully earn the bounty name. It also is a little bit strange to me how the side of the set says Land Bounty in English and not Ninjargon. I guess the English alphabet has appeared in Ninjago before they invented Ninjargon, so it's not fully out of universe, but it feels a bit awkward to have that just be an English text. They did that for the Temple Bounty too, and honestly, I think that this is because they want all of the bounties to feel like they are part of the same system. So the OG Land Bounty had the English text on the side, the original Destiny's Bounty has the English text on the side, the Temple Bounty from last year said in English, so I guess they have decided that everything that says bounty will be spelled in English, but literally every other word is in Ninjargon. So that's just one thing I did want to note that takes me out of the world building a little bit here, but otherwise this is a fun set, probably worth $130. On paper it definitely is. I don't really feel like it is, especially when I lift it up and play with it. This does not feel like $130 worth of Lego in the same way that the OG Land Bounty really felt like it absolutely was worth $130, but it is what it is. I do like it. It's a fun set. Just honestly doesn't feel like a huge upgrade compared to the original design. Here is now our first Ninjago Legends set. This is 71871 Battle at the Dragon's Blade. It retails for $100 and comes with 1,016 pieces and several brand new minifigures. At this time of this recording, Ninjago Duskfall, which is what this is based off of, has not been released yet, so I do not know who any of these characters are. Many have speculated they are descendants of the ninja, others believe that this is some sort of alternate universe, and given the Great Devourer set, I am more inclined to believe that this is some sort of an alternate universe where the ninja are not the ninja that we know. We have these different characters, and they're facing off against the Oni and the Great Devourer working in tandem, which is what these sets seem to suggest, which is a very interesting concept, because otherwise it doesn't really make sense that it would be in the future since the Devourer is long dead. We'll get more into that in the individual videos and speculation about what Duskfall even is, but as of right now, we have the two brand new ninja. You have Jin and Mira included in the set. You also have the new Sensei Ivo included, who is really interesting, definitely a very different design compared to Wu, and you have an Oni warrior who is piloting a massive Oni mech. Now, here is the unfortunate downside behind this model. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video for the intro, and as I will mention again when we get to the conclusion, Ninjago Legends is supposed to be made for older audiences. It's meant to be a gateway for older fans to remain interested in Ninjago. And as such, last year, all of these sets were targeted towards an older age range. And ideally, that is how Ninjago Legends should be. Unfortunately, because of budget shenanigans going on behind the scenes, I am almost 100% certain that this set was initially designed as a 12+ age range set, but was forced to be demoted to a 9+ age range set, and presumably some Dragon's Rising set that was 9+ just got completely scrapped while this took its place because the X1 Ninja Charger was slotted in last minute, which we know for a fact because Ninjago Legacy was not ever supposed to come back, and it was a last-minute decision to bring it back as a full lineup. In any sense, that is why this model feels like it is a little bit design clashing in terms of the design philosophies of what it's trying to do. You have a really cool, gigantic dragon skull with a sword sticking out of its mouth, and that is the perfect place to pose characters and builds on top of it. And then you have two of the most simplistic models awkwardly perched on top of it. I have tried my best to make this look good. I think this is the nicest configuration. The official image has them swapped, so you can put the dragon on this side and the mech on the other side, which I think that could also work, but either way, it does feel a little awkward to me because these builds are barely above the standard 5+ age range build. You have your standard SCCBS mech with just a little more articulation than a normal mech of this size targeted towards really young kids would be, and then you have a dragon, which is also the same scale that the traditional Ninjago core dragons were, which were aimed towards much younger builders, and then of course it has just a little bit more detail, a little bit more articulation to justify it being a Legends set for display. That being said, I still feel like this looks very awkward. The wings in particular being just the blades don't really work for me. I feel like they're just way too skinny. And the frustrating thing is that we've seen basically 2 seconds of a Duskfall trailer, and we see this in the trailer, and the green dragon is way bigger, and it's got these gigantic, like, fabric-looking wings, and it feels super detailed, and I imagine that that was actually based off of the prototype of the set, which almost uncertainly absolutely was going to be at a higher age range, and they had to dumb it down to make it what it is. It's not even a bad set. I honestly think it's one of the most unique Ninjago set concepts, and I have a lot of fun looking at it. I think that this is just a really, really cool build to look at and admire, but again, it is marred by the fact that the builds on the top just are not to the level of quality that I would expect out of a more adult-oriented Ninjago set. So I say all that to say, this set is not even that bad. I actually think that a lot of parts of the build are really good. It just feels like it is wasted potential where it could have been so much better. Now, there's a couple of different things you can do. You can actually remove the dragon skull from the base, as I showed you, but if you have your figures posed on it, it does make it a bit awkward because a tree sticking out of the back does make up part of the display stand here. The dragon can sort of support its own weight on the mixel joints, on 2 of the mixel joints, although you kind of have to cheat and rest one of the legs downwards if you want to get it in more dynamic poses. I love the way the sword is done. This studs in the side technique for the sword looks really good. Even the stickers for the hilt and everything look very cool. And this is almost like a life-size sword, like you can imagine a regular human gripping this sword. So I'm really curious what stories that are going to be told around this. Maybe that was like a giant Oni Titan-sized sword. And then you get to the mech here and it kind of all falls apart. I have never managed to find a way to make this mech look good. I've tried and it just doesn't really work. I'm gonna take these off right now just so we can look at them a little bit closer, and by itself, I don't even mind the mech that much. I think it is a passable villain mech. It is definitely interesting in the way it uses the Master of the Mountain armor as almost like samurai armor pads for the shoulder pads here. It's got the 2 flags on the top, which are almost reminiscent of the Bone Knights from Ninjago Core. I don't really want to be reminded of Ninjago Core when looking at something like this, but it does remind me of it. And then, of course, you have the legs, which I think really kill the model for me. The legs being so simplistic. And again, if this was sold as a 5+ set, even 6 or 7+, I probably would have been lauding it as a really, really fun build to play with and a really cool villain build. Like, this would have been an awesome side build in a kid-oriented Ninjago set for a villain mech. But as a more adult-oriented display piece, it just really falls short to me. The only detail that makes it a little bit of a step above these standard mechs is that you have the ribcage built into the side, which is pretty neat. I actually do like the fact that they did include that, but again, it just feels like it is still overly simplified for what the model is supposed to be. But again, it had to be, because this is a 9+ set. Now, taking a look at the dragon, you'll notice I might come to a very similar conclusion here, where I like a lot of the ideas behind the dragon. I like the color scheme of sand green and dark green. I think that's a good idea for it. The head print is really cool. That's a very menacing head print for it. Even the jaw is done pretty nicely. It's a huge improvement over the previous brick-built jaws they've done for this style of head. Like for Rontu, I think this is a big improvement there, where they've just added a bit more thickness and depth to it, where I feel like they really listen to fan feedback. But then again, you get to these like floppy golden blade wings, which just feel kind of cheap. They don't really feel as premium as I would expect a Ninjago Legends set to be, and while I do like the banners almost forming a yin-yang with the black dragon and the golden fire, I just feel like, again, this set is a little lacking in terms of being a true display model. Now, the cool thing is that you can actually kind of angle the positioning of the jaw up and down, so you can move it upwards like this if you want the jaw to be really outwards. You can kind of click it down like this if you want it to be more open, or you can do it the way the instructions say to, which is just one more click down, which is just like this, which I think probably looks the best. So you have a few different angles to look at here. And of course you can pose your characters the best that way on a flat surface, but you can really do whatever you want with it. And that's something I do appreciate, that this is a display set that truly seems like it is meant to be customized. Like, the point of this display set is for you to be able to mess around with it, to play around with the customization, and that is actually really cool. Now, I will place the dragon back on the mount here, and you'll immediately see that this is partially why they really want you to have this be clicked one click down, because the dragon actually weighs the skull back a lot, and that was what I alluded to when I was mentioning I had a little bit of trouble placing the dragon on the skull. You can kind of move it forwards like this, and I guess that kind of works a little bit better, but it's still really back heavy. It makes it very back heavy. It makes it feel a lot less stable than I think that a normal Lego Ninjago set should feel, and nothing's gonna really break here, but it just doesn't feel as stable as it should. And then of course, you can actually get the Oni mech in a little bit of a more interesting position here. I don't even know if this is supposed to be a mech, or maybe this is just supposed to be a gigantic Oni. We do know that they are shapeshifters. They can literally change their size, so maybe this is just supposed to be the Oni. Like, that's not supposed to be a mech. I think that would actually honestly make a lot more sense. And then of course you can pose Mira running along the side here, and their sensei Ivo, who is facing against the Oni right up at the front. Honestly, after looking at this, I think I actually like this pose better than the way I had it, so maybe I'll leave it like this, but again, it does feel a little wobbly, a little back heavy, and I don't know, for a regular Lego set, I would not expect it to be this wobbly, and it feels unstable. It's not unstable, but it just kind of feels unstable, just due to the way that it's built. So again, not the perfect set. I like the aesthetics a lot. I think it is a really cool build, and it is a very cool concept for a Ninjago set to be focused on a display piece with a long, ancient battle with a dragon skeleton with a sword sticking out of its mouth. That is so cool, but in execution, it's just a little lacking, and I just hate the feeling that this was probably much cooler, and those images will probably never see the light of day. But now let's move on to my favorite set of the wave, which is the Twin Titan Mechs. Here is our next set, and this is 71870, the Twin Titan Mechs. This retails for $140 US and comes with 1,707 pieces, making the price seem really fair. And the very funny thing is, we actually know for certain that last minute LEGO actually decided to raise the price of this. When news first broke and when the very first press release came out, this was initially supposed to be $110. Miraculously, somehow. And I think LEGO saw that people were saying online that this is so remarkably well priced, they decided last minute before the set's release to up the price up to $140, which remarkably still feels like a really good deal for what you're getting. And I think that really speaks to the engineering quality of the models here. So we finally have our Titan mech lineup complete. We have Kai's and Nia's Titan's mech, which finally complete the full lineup. However, this is actually a really interesting topic because marketing-wise, they are marketed under Jin and Mira, the two different ninja that appear in Ninjago Legends Duskfall, and the villain minifigure included in the set also corresponds to Duskfall, and that is an Oni warrior. And the designer Lee Chi-wing actually stated on Instagram that this was actually quite a hard battle he had to fight to market these as Kai's and Nia's, because initially, he was asked to create the Titan mechs for the new characters Jin and Mira for fire-themed and water-themed, but unfortunately, that meant that Kai and Nia would probably never receive full, legit Titan mechs for themselves. And so they came to a bit of a compromise. They included extra heads in the set for Kai and Nia and Jin and Mira, so you can actually swap out the heads and choose which characters you actually want to use to pilot the mechs, and that is something I really appreciate. Lee said that that was a very hard choice to have to fight for that, and also to have them on the box art, but he really felt like it was important so that fans would not feel that the Titan mech lineup was incomplete. And I really appreciate that because while on paper it kind of feels like just silly semantics, it's actually really important to Ninjago fans that a particular lineup that LEGO set out to do is 100% complete. And now we can officially say that it is, because the set does actually include minifigures of Kai and Nia. Now, this is really cool. There's so many things you can do with them. They each have about the same amount of articulation, so I will showcase that with the Kai mech, and then we'll do a brief showcase with the Nia mech as well. First off, yes, you do have knees. Both of them do have fully functioning knees. You have piston-articulated ankles, which are utilizing the Bionicle Titan piston elements, which again, I'm so grateful they finally are bringing those back from 2006. They never really went away, but they weren't really used in that sense until recently to be used for mech articulation. You can rotate the legs laterally, which is very cool, and you can, of course, move the legs back and forth, splay them outwards, and the armor pads actually move with the mechs. So you can see here, you have this dark red armor piece, kind of Lee's signature LEGO piece that he includes in almost every one of his sets. This one bends back and forth so you can adjust the knee pads. And then, of course, when you get to the upper arms, you can actually rotate the arms back and forth like this, so you can have the arms be kind of crossed. You can move it straight and curl all the way up. And then, of course, you can have the arms bend outwards, up and down. So you have almost the entire full range of articulation. I can't really think of anything else I would want. Yes, you do also have waist articulation, so you can bend the waist and rotate it back and forth. I mean, this is more articulation than Bionicle sets used to have. And this is fully done with the system building techniques, which is very, very impressive. Of course, you can also move the heads up and down. Now, the aesthetics of the mechs, despite them being the twin Titan mechs and they share a lot of design similarities, there's also a lot of really cool things they have done to make these feel unique compared to each other and compared to all of the other Titan mechs. I'm really curious what role this will play in the story, but the sides of the gauntlets for the arms actually feature demon faces on the sides of the arms here. So you can see that they're literally built into the gauntlets here, where it's an open mouth with teeth, there's fire burning inside the mouth, there are the demon Oni horns sticking out of the sides, and the weapons the mech uses are actually kind of the blades that stick out and can rotate out from the two twin demon heads on the side of the mech arms. And I'm very, very curious to see where that is going to play a role in the show. That is such a cool concept. Like, potentially, maybe these are old, like, Oni skulls, or they're using Oni powers against them, because of course the Oni are the demon faces depicted on the side here. So I think that is such a cool idea for a mech to be using weaponry like that. That is really, really interesting. And I almost dropped the mech there. One of the really cool things that it also does is that you have this gigantic cannon on the back. So if you rotate the model all the way to the back here, I'm kind of surprised that this model like fully survived almost falling off and crashing down. I was able to catch it, but yeah, no parts fell off there, which really speaks to the stability of these models. But zooming out for the Kai mech here, you have a large cannon on the back, and so this can be fired out, and it is a really, really cool use of pieces. It's using the helicopter blades as a gigantic shoulder-mounted cannon, and that really reminds me of LEGO Exoforce. That is something that they would do in LEGO Exoforce. We haven't really seen that in modern LEGO mechs, but these are the mechs that really do feel like a return to form for LEGO, and they are having all of the cool design sensibilities that Exoforce had without any of the issues of stability that that theme often was plagued by. Moving on to the back of the mech here, I really like how it feels fully armored up and complete from the back, which is really nice. Of course, as you can see, you have the usage of the boat studs in the back in transparent orange to make it feel like rocket packs. You have the mixel jointed waist armor, and you also have the option to swap the backpacks back and forth. So you can take off this turret, put the rocket boosters on this one, and swap the weapons back and forth in between the mechs. The only downside is that, unfortunately, unlike the previous other Titan mechs in the lineup where Coles and Lloyds could have their backs be swapped, these do not have the same exact back attachment system as the other Titan mechs do. Instead, they have their own system, so it makes sense, I guess, Kai's and Nia's can interface with each other, and then Lloyds and Coles can interface with each other, but it's not that they're all sharing the same exact interface design. So that is the only minor downside, but honestly, to achieve everything else that these models do, I can accept that. And these just simply look so cool. I'm gonna dive a lot more into these in my in-depth review, so I'm gonna pause there and take a look at the Nia mech, which this one is actually posed on the stand. And this is such a cool design for a mech build. You can see that on the back here, you have all the different gigantic booster engines. It really reminds me of the Aero booster from Exoforce, another classic LEGO Exoforce build here. And while these are the twin Titan mechs, you can also see that this is a very interesting and very different design compared to the Kai one because it's a lot slimmer. While Kai's was super bulky and feels more like a brawler with these big gauntlets and the large knee pads and everything, this feels a lot more slim and agile, and it really makes sense for the characters. So you've got these thinner knees here and same amount of articulation, so you can still rotate the legs laterally, you can move the legs based on bionicle piston articulation, and there are some similarities in the design aesthetics, like the light gray seems to be used as the kind of under-armored piece or the joint elements, and then you have the dark blue being used here and the dark red being used over there. There are still completely different building techniques, and these are very different models. They are not just two identical builds, they're built pretty much 100% differently. There's almost no shared similarities between them when it comes to the builds, other than a little bit when it comes to the upper legs here and the upper thighs, but everything else is completely different. This does have waist articulation, as you can see right here, which is very cool. And then you've also got a really interesting method that they used for the skirt piece over here to allow it to kind of make it feel like cascading armor plates. And yes, that does also move based on how you move the legs. You can choose to have those armor pieces move back and forth ever so slightly. So it's just done so well. You can move the head back and forth, and of course you can angle the booster jets back and forth as well. Now this one does have a large-scale weapon in the form of this gigantic staff, which they can actually pass back and forth in between each other, which is nice to see. And yeah, overall, honestly, I don't have that much else to say about this one, even a little bit less compared to some of the other models, because I spent a lot of time complaining about a lot of the other models, but I can think of virtually no complaints about this set, which is very rare. I don't think that there's really any LEGO set in recent history I can think of where I got it and I built it and I had literally no complaints, but I can't think of anything right now. I might get into more in the in-depth review, but I am so pleased with the execution of the set. I've seen people complain online and say that, hey, there should have been 2 stands for the mechs, and honestly, I don't think it needed 2. You can use the same stand for both, and I'm actually glad it did not include 2 stands because obviously this is fully maxing out the budget of the models, and I feel like if one more stand was included, those are parts that would have been taken away from the mechs to go into a stand. So I'm honestly kind of happy it only includes 1 stand because every piece counts for something in the budget, and the designer actually stated online that they never even considered doing 2 stands because there's only 1 rocket pack included in the set. So you can choose, it's up to you to choose which mech gets the rocket pack, but whichever one doesn't get it is going to be standing on the ground. So I think that actually makes total sense as to why there's only 1 stand, and otherwise, really cool to see this. Great to see the minifigure swappability between each other, and final thing I want to mention is that they actually recolored the Storm helmet for Nia in dark blue and azure instead of gunmetal gray and azure, which is very funny they did that because the outfit is gunmetal gray, so it totally would have worked to use the old one, but hey, I'm not complaining about getting a recolor that adds a little bit of variety to these suits. I guess the only complaint is now I need to somehow hunt down second copies of these minifigures because I want to display one with Jin and Mira, and of course with Kai and Nia as well, so I'm gonna need to find an extra torso and legs somewhere. Maybe they'll appear in Pick-a-Brick, we're gonna have to wait and see. With that though, let's now take a look at the final set of the wave, and definitely probably the most controversial set out of all of these. Here is our final set of the Ninjago wave for summer 2026. 71872 is the Ultra Dragon Battle. It costs $200 and comes with 2,178 pieces. And when this set was first rumored, this was basically a dream LEGO set of mine and many other Ninjago fans. Fans have been wanting a large-scale rendition of the Great Devourer fighting the Ultra Dragon for years. In 2012, we got our very first Ultra Dragon versus Great Devourer set, but that was 2012, almost 15 years ago, and building techniques have improved a lot since then. The Great Devourer was really small, it wasn't really that credible of a threat, and the Ultra Dragon was very goofy in its execution. I think that it was a fun model to play with, but as an adult-oriented display model, the possibilities for the Ultra Dragon versus the Great Devourer were endless. Which is why I think everybody was very surprised to see the model be what it is. This appears to be an alternate universe depiction of that original battle. Now, the Ninjago Dragons Rising show has been delving into the concept of cycles recently, and we don't fully understand at this point in the show's history what a cycle actually is, but the Source Dragons mention them a lot. They talk about having met Lloyd during past cycles. Lloyd has received visions of potential past lives. He was in a graveyard full of all of the ninjas' graves at one point in Season 1 of Dragons Rising, and I imagine that is some sort of cycle, then that happened in some alternate timeline where things maybe went a little bit worse than they're going in the current show's timeline now. In any sense, this appears to be playing into the cycles concept that Ninjago is introducing, where they can tell similar stories throughout essentially what will be like the Ninjago multiverse, but it's not like they can really cross over, it's just different timelines in history when the world is destroyed and everyone is reborn again, except they're born a little bit differently. And that is all speculation. Another piece of speculation here is that the main characters included in the set, you have Jin, Mira, and Nate here. They all seem to represent different elements. Kai seems to be somewhat related to Jin because he is the fire ninja. Cole is perhaps related to Nate, who is earth-themed, and the most interesting one is Mira because she has a water-themed mech, but in this set she has a lightning-themed hoverboard, which really suggests that she might be maybe an ancestor of Jay and Nia. So this could also be taking place in the far future, but then again, the Great Devourer has long been dead. You could maybe argue in the lore that this is one of the spawn of the Great Devourer, where it's one of the Vermilion from Season 7 that has grown up and become the new Great Devourer, but that still doesn't explain the Ultra Dragon coming back in this form. So there's a lot of insanity going on here. That's not even mentioning the Oni leader included in this set. The Oni were not present throughout the original battle whatsoever. We did not know about the Oni until Season 8 of Ninjago, so there's a lot of very strange things going on with this set, and fortunately or unfortunately, the designers have taken this in such a weird and bizarre direction that the dragon doesn't really look anything like the original Ultra Dragon, other than the fact that it has 4 heads and they're all 4 themed around different elements. I'm not even convinced they're supposed to be the OG 4 elements because the original Ultra Dragon had fire, lightning, earth, and ice to correspond with the main ninja. However, this head here appears to be more water-themed than ice. I guess you could kind of interpret the texture of the rippling water element as maybe ice that's kind of expanding out of the mouth, but it definitely feels a lot more water-focused. So again, it's a very strange idea. Add to the fact that the dragon is standing up on 2 legs, it feels a lot more humanoid than before. A lot of the green is gone from the color scheme and really just used in the wings, and this is entirely its own thing. The only thing that is remotely somewhat close to how it appeared in the original show is the Great Devourer, and I actually really love the way this is built. The Great Devourer actually has a bit of articulation, which I'm having a lot of fun just kind of swiveling its head back and forth on right now, and you have the ability to open and close the mouth. There is the great red tongue there, which looks a lot like it did in the original show. And I feel like you had the basis for a really solid set here, where you had the Great Devourer coming out of the ground. This is a really cool dynamic model. The Ultra Dragon is just so strange and bizarre, and I have to wonder if maybe they chose to do it like this because the original Ultra Dragon would have been flying or maybe on all four legs, and that would have taken up so much space on a display stand. And so when they decided to make it stand up on two legs, it started looking so different compared to the original Ultra Dragon, then they decided to just do their own thing with the set. That's my only logical explanation as to why the set is the way it is. It's also weird to get this during the 15th anniversary of Ninjago, depicting the final battle of Ninjago for Season 1, but again, you just have a very, very different depiction of the model. Now, there's actually a lot of cool things you can do with the set. Not only can you pose all the minifigures around it, so you have Jin, Mira, and Nate who are kind of rushing on, attacking the Great Devourer. You also have the Oni here, who seems to have been hit by a bolt of lightning, and that is a super cool dynamic display. You have the rock and pavement crumbling as it explodes out, and the lightning pieces erupting from the ground right where the lightning hoverboard is aiming, which is very cool. And it's a little bit hard to see, but you actually have a bit of a collapsed pagoda gate on the back here, hinting at a slight angle. It's kind of leaning at an angle here, hinting there's a lot of destruction going on in the scene. So it is a really cool scene. It's a really nice display piece. I think it looks really cool. It's just very bizarre as to what this is actually supposed to represent, and I'm very excited to get answers when Ninjago Duskfall comes out later this year. However, unlike many of the other Ninjago Legends sets, you can actually remove the dragon fully from the stand and play with it by itself. So setting these stand aside, the dragon will just stand up on its two legs and you can actually play with it. The legs cannot articulate, and I actually think that's a good thing because I feel like if the legs did articulate, it would have been a lot more complex. It probably would have looked a lot worse, and I'm not convinced it would have been able to hold up so much weight here, especially to capture the curvature of the dragon's spine here, to really make it still feel organic like a creature. That being said, very importantly, the dragon still does have waist articulation, and this is something that the original model did not have, so it is cool to see that be factored into this dragon here, especially for a Ninjago Legends model, which is supposed to be more play-focused. You can really see that there is quite a lot of 360-degree waist articulation that you can do with this dragon. It rotates all the way around, and this is a very, very important detail because it actually allows you to be able to pose it very differently on the stand. You can kind of have it be leaning towards the Devourer or leaning away or just changing the way it works. So the waist articulation is a super crucial part of the review here, and definitely wanted to call that one out here. Now, the feet can sort of rotate back and forth, but this is really only to allow you to place it easily on terrain, on the ground, or on the stand. This does not help with posing whatsoever because, again, the legs do not move, so that's really all you can do with it. And, of course, you can use the tail to sway back and forth, which is quite nice. You can also bend this up and down for the tail over here and rotate it, so these are all just on different ratcheting joints, and then you have ball joints being used for the back of the tail here to allow you to bend it back and forth like so. Finally, the wings are mounted on ball joints, and they're mounted in a really strange way because, first of all, the Technic mounts for the ball joints have a lot of flex in them, so you can bend them back and forth, but unfortunately that leads to you like trying to lift the wings up and then they kind of settle down at a position, so it's a little bit awkward to pose, and unfortunately the wings are so large and they're very heavy, even with these vinyl elements, that they do tend to kind of droop down, and that's something you might notice throughout the review, is that they will kind of flop down if you are not paying extra attention to making sure they are posed up exactly the way you want. Now, this would have been solved by the original LEGO CCBS friction joint they introduced in 2012 for Hero Factory Breakout. Unfortunately, that piece is long discontinued, so we are basically just stuck with this. Although that piece was always kind of a cheat anyway because it just put a little bit of rubber in between the ball joint and didn't really allow the ball joints to stand on their own weight. So it was a controversial element. I understand why it's been phased out, but unfortunately, a piece like that would have solved a lot of problems here in that the wings do tend to kind of droop down. Of course, the heads can fully articulate on ball joints. You can move them back and forth, as well as the jaw open and shut, which is quite nice, and every single one has the dragon rising strike gimmick element being integrated into the dragon head here, so That is cool to see that being used outside of just the gimmicks. And then you also have the elemental abilities streaking out of them. So you have lightning coming out of this one. You've got the Nexo Knight's blade elements, also used for the Eye of Sauron, being used as the rocky elements here. You have these pieces, which really look like water to me. I guess they're supposed to be ice, but they really look like water in the way that they're done. They're often always used as water tendrils. It was actually made for Lego elves, where it was used for water. And then you have fire, represented by transparent red axes. And that's kind of the weakest one to me. I feel like it would have been a lot cooler to have like maybe a beam of fire shooting out of the mouth here. If you're gonna do a display piece, fully commit to the display. Do like a brick-built massive fire beam striking the Devourer, or at least coming out of the mouth. I think that would have looked really cool, but unfortunately it just kind of has these transparent red axes, which feel a little bit awkward compared to the gigantic elemental abilities that you can see on all of the other heads. That being said though, I actually do really find this very interesting. It is a little bit awkward in its color scheme, and I will say that. Again, not everything about the set is amazing. I think the color scheme does feel a little bit awkward in the sense that you have the black body here, the black continuing on the legs, the white, and there's a lot of gold. I think there's an over-reliance on gold here, and there's almost no green on the entire model. And I guess that's not really the point of maybe this Ultra Dragon isn't supposed to be affiliated with the Green Ninja. There is no Green Ninja in the set after all, so maybe it's doing its own thing. But it does feel a little bit odd to me that the wings are so green, but you barely see any green on the model itself. And this was something that the original Ultra Dragon did have a little bit of a problem with, but it still had a bit of green integrated in. But I think the thing that really throws me off here are the golden heads. It almost looks a lot more like the crystallized golden Ultra Dragon, and I don't want to be reminded of crystallized. Please do not make me think of crystallized right now while Ninjago is actually in a good storytelling arc right now, so I definitely don't want to be reminded of that, but it really reminds me of it because the heads are all gold, and I feel like that has thrown off the color balance a little bit, where it's very gold heavy on the top here, and there's like a little bit of gold here, and then dark tan just right around the feet. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you can also, of course, move the arms. So the arms are just on click joints, so you can move them back and forth. You can do that, and you can move the hands, so that's nice. You can move those around. But overall, it is so bizarre, and the over-reliance on gold kind of reminds me of some of the Bionicle G2 mistakes they made, where there was so much gold being factored in. I actually felt like they had a bit too much, and it detracted from the main elemental point of the model, and I think that they're kind of doing that here. I think it would have been so much cooler if they recolored the dragon heads for all the different colors. You already have red, you already have a bluer color for water for Nia, but you could pretend that one's for ice. You would have just needed to do two different colors for these two heads right here. Maybe do like an orange one if you want it to be bright, or maybe like a brown one if you want it to be a little bit duller, or maybe like a yellow one here for the lightning one. And I think that would have just looked so much more interesting as a model and really emphasized the four different elements. But as is right now, it feels very gold heavy. It's a little bit too gold for me. I'm sure that works for some people, and I'm sure that aesthetic will work for some people, but for me, I just would prefer if they went back to those original elemental designs. Now, I do, however, want to call out the display stand, which is very cool. You have some great rock work here, really, really nice rock work. It really looks like the Devourer is bursting out of the pavement. The only awkward part are these two transparent pieces here. I guess they're meant to represent rock shards pointing out, but they feel so perfectly symmetrical to me, especially when looking at it like this. Clearly, these are just 100% symmetric, and they're using the same pieces. It just feels a little bit too perfect and a bit awkward. I feel like it would have been better to use maybe just like a slightly different slope, like maybe use one of the slopes with studs on this one or on the other one, just to make it feel a bit more asymmetric, or have one like mounted further out and one on a shorter transparent beam, or maybe just have one of them. I don't know. As it is right now, it feels a little bit awkward just how clean of an angle it is to stick the rocks out. And I know that's a minor nitpick, but just something I wanted to point out. Otherwise though, this is a very cool display piece. I am just so torn on this set because in some ways, it is one of the coolest Ninjago display pieces we've ever gotten. It is very competently built, it is remarkably well done, but also it is depicting a set that I've wanted for so long, but in such a bizarre and strange way that I feel like we're probably never going to get the set that I've dreamed of, which is just a legit Season 1 Ultra Dragon versus Great Devourer battle. For once, I am on the side of the Ninjago nostalgia-brained TikTokers, where I'm like, where's the old ninja? Where's the regular Great Devourer? You know, where's the regular Ultra Dragon? I can't believe I'm saying this and I'm on the side of the TikTok brain Ninjago fans, but I am was very much hoping this would be more nostalgia focused. And if you're gonna do the Ultra Dragon versus the Devourer, this is so close to being the set that everybody wanted to get, to actually have a crazy display model of that climactic final battle. But instead it's just something else. And I'm not bashing it for being something else. I actually respect LEGO for taking such a risk to make this be based off of some other random thing they're doing with Duskfall and have all these other characters in it. It's just very odd to make it the Ultra Dragon versus the Devourer. I almost wish they, like, I don't know, made the Devourer red and made the dragon a completely different color and just called it something else, like this is the Great Vermilion maybe, and maybe made this just some other dragon, and then it would have been its own thing, and you would not have had to rely on the nostalgia points of it being the Ultra Dragon. But then we could have then gotten the actual Ultra Dragon versus Devourer set in the future, which now I think is literally never going to happen. So that's what I have to say about this one. I'm going to talk about this a lot more in the individual review, so stay tuned for that. But I hope you enjoyed our look at one of the strangest new Ninjago sets that we've gotten in recent history. And now let's zoom out and take a look at my thoughts on the entire set wave as a whole. Alright, and with that, we have summed up my thoughts on the entire wave of Ninjago Summer 2026. As the final wave for Ninjago's 15th anniversary, they really went all out with this one, and they did everything they could, but unfortunately, I do feel that it is held back a little bit by budget, and I find that very funny because if you look at literally any other LEGO theme, 90% of all other LEGO themes do not get nearly as much budget as Ninjago does for minifigures, for sets, for the variety in what you can actually have the theme have to offer. And yet, I still feel that this feels a little bit strained, and I think that a lot of that boils down to the decision to have 6 Dragons Rising sets, 3 Legend sets, and 1 Legacy set. I honestly think it maybe would have made more sense to keep the Legacy set, the final one, have it maybe be all in January or March, and not have that kind of muddle up this wave. And again, as I mentioned, just remove one of the Legend sets and convert it into something else. Now, I do really like this set. I think it is a really cool model. I feel like if they literally were to have released this under a higher age range next year, it would have been one of the all-time best Ninjago models of all time, as opposed to right now being a pretty cool display stand where 2 very average and mediocre builds can stand on top of it. So I do like the set. I think it looks cool. I just feel like it could have been so much better, and it really feels like it was designed to be at a higher age range until they decided to convert the age range over to Legends, or over to Legacy, and take it away from Legends. So that is really the only complaint I have there, but overall, I actually do really like how, unlike the first half of the year, I feel like this wave actually does try to take a few major risks. You have a very bizarre Ultra Dragon versus Great Devourer set, which is not what anybody would have expected from that. You have the Twin Titan mechs, which sure, I guess, are a staple of Ninjago at this point, but it is still really cool to get 2 of them in one set, and they are both so good, so I really have no complaints there. And really, one of the standout sets for me for Dragons Rising is getting an entire set focused on the new ninja team. Wildfire's transforming dragon mech is so cool because I believe it is the first set since our very first Ninjago Dragons Rising new ninja focus set, which was Sora's transforming mech, that only features the new ninja. So it has Sora, Aaron, and Wildfire. Sadly, no Frack. I'm very sad that there's no Frack this wave. I think that that is a pretty major exclusion. I don't know why that we don't have him. Even just the same minifigure again in this set would have been really cool. But altogether, there's none of the original cast appearing in this set, which I think is a pretty major stride towards LEGO taking a chance on the new characters and seeing, are these actually going to perform well? So if there's any set out of all of these that I really hope does well, it's this one. I know the Twin Titan mechs are going to do well. I'm sure the Ultra Dragon is going to do pretty well. I really hope that this set does well because it is a good sign to LEGO that the new characters and the new Ninja are worth investing into. And I really hope we'll continue to see them after Dragons Rising, so we'll see. If this set does well, we're going to have to see if those characters will continue to appear when Dragons Rising wraps up. Altogether, though, I do think that this is a diverse wave. There's a lot to say about it, but in terms of the distribution of sets, it feels like they're trying to do a little bit too much with too little budget. Now, just kind of ranking these sets here, there are 10 sets in total, and it's a little bit hard to rank because some of them are a lot smaller than others. I think that probably near the bottom, maybe the absolute bottom of the list, is Lloyd's Dragon Mech Battle Pack. I feel like it is so strange, as I mentioned in the individual review and in my coverage here, that the enemy it includes is a Loyalist, probably one of the least interesting characters when this wave literally introduces the new Horde enemies of the Fire and Ice monsters, and I can't believe we are only getting the Fire monster in one set, where the entire point of the elemental monsters is they attack in hordes, and you're supposed to have multiples, and yet you can literally only get one of them in one of the most expensive sets of the wave. So that doesn't feel great to me. I'm really hoping it'll appear in a magazine, which they have done a lot of times in the past. Actually, literally as of a couple minutes ago, obviously this video will be published probably tomorrow, so as of yesterday when this video comes out, they just announced that they are going to be including Grimfax in a Ninjago magazine. So that's crazy. If they can include him, I feel like they can include the Fire monster in a magazine. So I'm very happy about that. I hope that he will appear in a magazine, but as of right now, you literally can only get him in the Land Bounty, an $130 set, the largest Dragons Rising set, and instead you have the Lloyd Mech Battle Pack, which would have been the perfect time to include one of your new elemental monsters for the summer in it. Instead, you get the same Loyalist that we get last year, and actually there are basically no new minifigures in that set, which is kind of crazy for a Ninjago Summer Wave release. So that's probably at the bottom. I think the next set on the list has got to be the 4+ one. I think that out of all the 4+ sets, I actually kind of like this one, but just compared to everything else in the wave, I would just rank that one next. After that, it gets a little bit tricky because despite what I've said about the wave feeling a little bit imbalanced and not very focused, I actually like a lot of the sets. I think the next set has to be, I hate to say it, but because of the price, the third worst set has got to be the X1 Ninja Charger. And I hate saying that because I think it is an amazing build, but as I mentioned in my review, both in this video and in the in-depth review, I feel like it is the kind of set that doesn't really justify its existence. It takes away from the entire wave, the fact that it eats up a 14+ age range slot, and also is probably the least interesting thing to remake for the third time in Ninjago history. I think that's got to be because of all those factors. That's the next one. From there, I'm going to go to the Kai and Cole combiner vehicles. I think that it's a fun and interesting concept. At least it's trying to do something a little bit new, but both vehicles don't really appeal to me that much, and I feel like we are so oversaturated with red cars from Ninjago. This wave alone has 3 red cars. We got another big red vehicle earlier this year for Kai's motorcycle in the treehouse, so this year alone has given us 4 large Kai cars, which feels like way too many in a single year, and I'd be very happy just never getting another one for a few years, but we know they sell well, so LEGO will keep doing them. I think it would have been much more interesting if potentially we were to have gotten that same combiner set but focused on different characters. So Cole is fine, having the motorcycle there, we rarely get a Cole focus, but maybe if you had like a Zane vehicle for him to combine with, that would have been interesting. Or Jay and Nia combiner vehicles, I think would have made more sense than maybe make the Jay car from earlier this year into Cole's car. They do that a lot where they kind of reassign sets to different Ninja. I think it would have made more sense in that case. But I get why LEGO did it because they wanted the red car to sell well, so that's why this one has Kai being one of the main focus points of that set. Going on from that, the next set I'm going to count here is probably Battle of the Dragon's Blade. I love the idea behind the set. I think that the execution leaves a little bit to be desired, and we have seen examples before where it's actually in the infamous like LEGO image leak. It was like the LEGO survey image leak. This is all the way back in, I think, 2022 is when a lot of images of products came out. And long story short, there was a really cool 18+ Maleficent dragon set for LEGO Disney that the image came out and it was like the coolest like evil dragon build ever. And everyone was super excited for it. And then the final set came out and it was for like, I think it was 8 plus or maybe 7 plus, and it was super dumbed down, and you could have seen the bones of the 18 plus set. And the designer actually explained online, they said that, yeah, I designed the set to be 18 plus, and then we were asked to change it into a younger kid-oriented set. So I literally had to take this amazing model I made and dumb it down because I was asked to change the age range and slot it into a different age range slot. And I feel like that is, I mean, I don't know for sure, obviously I don't have behind the scenes info, but it really feels like that's what happened here, because it is so weird for a Ninjago Legend set to be 9 plus, other than the fact that they said, oh, if we're also doing Legacy, which we know was decided last minute for this year, that's gonna eat up the age range slot for 14 plus. So what I imagine actually happened is, I'm sure they were still planning to do the same distribution here. Maybe the X1 did not exist, but the 14 plus age range slot for the X1 was intended to go to either one of the Titan Mechs or the Ultra Dragon, and then we were going to get 9 plus for the other one, and then 12 plus for the other one, which is what it is, and then 12 plus for this set. And I think if this was 12 plus, the builds on the top would have been a lot better. But then when they said, oh, let's actually bring back Legacy and make Legacy eat up all of our 14 plus age range slots, they then had to demote one of the Legends sets to the 9 plus age range, and out of the 3 Legend sets to demote, this makes sense because you really cannot make these any more simplistic. So I think they chose to demote this one, and I really do feel like that significantly affected the build experience and the overall look and feel on display, because it feels very awkward to have like a super simplistic baby mech standing on top of, admittedly, a very cool sculpture. So definitely feel like this one was impacted by behind the scenes decisions, which is very unfortunate because it had the potential to be a really cool set. So that one's gonna be next. From there, I'm honestly probably going to say next is going to be at the mid-range. We're going to say, in terms of build quality, the Transforming Dragon Mech here, I think that it's a fun concept. I just think that when it comes to transforming Ninjago vehicles, I was so blown away by how amazing Lloyd's Transforming Jet Mech was last year that the transformation feature here is just not that exciting. You just kind of extend the torso, and the limbs don't even change or get modified in any significant way. Like, the back legs literally do not change at all for the transformation, and the front legs don't change either. So you don't really do anything other than bend the curve in the torso and then move the dragon head up and the mech head back. And I feel like for a mech that transforms into a dragon, I would have expected a much wilder transformation. I'm not expecting complexity for complexity's sake, but it does feel a little bit of a letdown compared to what the concept of the set suggests and what the literal last transforming Ninjago set we got just this same time last year, how good that was compared to this. So I'm going to say this one next. The next one I'm going to say is actually probably the land bounty. Yeah, I'm going to go for the land bounty here. It does feel like a bit of a downgrade from the original one. I do like the transformation features. I think they're cool, but the OG land bounty was so much bigger. It had a lot of character. It had those big cloth sails, which I feel like need to be included in every bounty and are unfortunately missing from this one. So I'm going to say this one next. Although there are a lot of things I do actually like about it, the vehicles by themselves are really cool, and that transformation feature is genuinely very nice and works really smoothly. To be able to switch this flying ship around is actually very cool, and also transform the wheels into both a car and a motorcycle, which the original one could not do. So I have to give it kudos for that. So I do like this one. This one's kind of above average here for the wave. The next set that I really like, and I guess that's my favorite Dragons Rising set of the wave, is Zilvar and Grimtack, the Dragon Beast. It's the smallest one, it's $20, but it really captured my attention. I feel like it's such a unique villain build. It's not perfect. The back legs really do suffer from the technique, as I mentioned earlier in the video, that LEGO designers do to, they actually have to do this to simplify and dumb down the points of articulation to make it easier for kids to play with sets. This is a rule they instituted all the way back in the days of LEGO Exoforce, where they got a record number of complaints from parents saying that their kids could not make the mechs stand up. They have since really course corrected in the opposite direction, and that is why stuff like this has back legs that can't really move, because they're worried that kids will be frustrated if you can't stand it up. I think it's a bit overkill in my opinion. I think if they had mixel joints for the back legs, it would totally work just fine. but it is a little bit easier, like 5% easier for kids to plunk it down and not have to worry about having to pose it if you just fix those back legs in a ratchet joint. So I understand why it is the way it is, and that's such an easy fix as well. You can just swap it out for mixel joints if you do have those parts in your collection, but everything else about it is so good. The minifigures, the new antagonist, the aesthetic of it being a half gorilla, half dragon fusion is something we have never gotten from Ninjago before, and it's super cool, so love that set. And then finally, my two favorite sets. The Ultra Dragon Battle is my second favorite set of the wave, and it's a very controversial pick because this is not the set that I wanted when I heard that we were getting the Ultra Dragon versus the Great Devourer. I think we were all expecting it to be a recreation of the classic battle from 2012 that ended season 1 of Ninjago. It would have been the perfect thing to do for the 15th anniversary, but instead they're doing something different, and we're going into this alternate timeline and another cycle, so to speak, and that's my hypothesis. It's the only one that makes sense as to why we're having different elemental masters be fighting the Great Devourer and a very weird humanoid-looking Ultra Dragon. And I've seen a lot of complaints online that it feels too much like a mech or a human than a dragon, and I get that, and I agree, but I think that's kind of the point. They're trying to make it do its own thing. They're not trying to make it feel like what we've gotten in the past. So as a LEGO build by itself, agnostic to the story, Ninjago Duskfall is not out yet, so I do not know what the story is going to be like whatsoever. So I had to judge this based on just the build, and based on just the build, it's really, really cool. It's a ton of fun to put together. It looks amazing on display. So second favorite, and then my favorite set of the wave has to be the Twin Titan Mechs. And again, these were designed by the legendary LEGO designer Lee Chi-Wing, who consistently outdoes himself. I will note that among my top 3 favorites, both of the top ones, or 2 of the top ones, were designed by him. The $20 set was designed by him, and this Twin Titan Mechs was also designed by him, and it's insane because he also designed Old Town and the Blacksmith Shop this year, which are 2 of my other favorite Ninjago sets this year, which I don't understand how he's able to design literally the best sets ever consistently multiple times a year, where most LEGO designers can maybe design 1 or 2 sets a year, and a lot of times that means they're like $10 sets or $20 sets, but Lee is designing like the $300 set, the $100 set, the $150 set, and the $20 set all at once, and they're all really good. So absolute shout out, kudos where kudos is due here. These are 2 of the best Ninjago mechs ever. I honestly will dare to say they're probably some of the best LEGO mechs ever, and I am completely just in love with the design here. I think they're done so well. The accessories being swappable is super cool. The color schemes look slick. The fact that one is a stand so you can have it hover above the ground is really awesome. The posability is unparalleled. These are some of the best. So big fan of these sets, and that sums up my ranking of every single one of these summer 2026 LEGO Ninjago sets. Definitely a very controversial wave. I've seen a lot of people online battling it out over whether or not these sets are good or not, or if they should have done the Legend sets, or if they should have just focused on Dragons Rising, and I share a lot of those opinions. I think that they tried to do too much in one wave, and sometimes it is possible to have too much of a good thing, and I think they bit off a little bit more than they could chew with even the higher budget they allocated to Ninjago for this wave was not enough to counter trying to do so much at once. But it is so cool to get so much variety. I love how strong of an IP Ninjago is that they can actually afford to do stuff like this, to have multiple sets dedicated to completely different media sources that are not even relevant to the main Ninjago TV show, and that's how I think it should be. And I was sitting down with Doc recently, one of the writers of Ninjago Dragons Rising, and I'll end the video with this, and he had a really cool quote, and he said, what he's been really seeing Ninjago as is that this is the Star Wars of LEGO. This is like the Marvel of LEGO, where Ninjago isn't just the main TV show. Ninjago is a massive world, and stories can be told in Ninjago across different timelines, across different periods of history, across different characters, and the point is not just to follow the main characters. The universe has gotten big enough to this point where it is an interconnected world where LEGO can focus on different stories. And I think that that statement has never rang more true than for this wave of Ninjago, where despite the fact that I feel like they're trying a little bit too much and they just didn't quite have enough budget or age range marks to accomplish everything they wanted to do. I appreciate the ambition, I appreciate that they're trying to do something new, and they're trying to push Ninjago into new heights, focusing on new characters like Jin, Mira, and Nate being the main ninja that we focus on, which is really, really interesting, and focusing on some of the past of Ninjago, with the history, with Ninjago Legacy, and the fact that we can have all of these live on store shelves at the same time is very cool. So I'll wrap up the video there. Hope you enjoyed our early look at the entire wave of LEGO Ninjago sets, and stay tuned because following this video, I will be publishing individual reviews of pretty much all of these sets. By the time this video is public, I will have hopefully filmed almost all of them, so stay tuned and comment down below which ones you want to see. I don't want to publish all of them at once because then they'll just cannibalize each other and people won't watch them, so I'll probably try to space them out a little bit over the next couple of days. So comment below the order in which you want to see reviews, which sets do you want to see in detail, and I will get on those as soon as I can. So thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon, and bye for now.